Good morning, everyone, on a rainy day. I'm glad you were able to join us here. My name is Mike Terry. I'd like to welcome everyone here to this regular monthly hearing of the Cobb County Planning Commission. Planning Commission is an advisory board appointed by the Board of Commissioners. It's our job to investigate every zoning, every land use permit that is applied for with the county. We then will have this hearing and then make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. It then falls to them to make the final and binding decision, and they will hear the case in 2 weeks, and that would make it on, well, I don't have the date. March the 20th, on March the 20th. So if you're here for any of the cases today, you will need to be back on the 20th of this month for the Board of Commissioners hearing. It's our custom to invite various members of the clergy to join us and have some opening remarks, but we had a mix-up today and our minister was not able to join us. But that's fine because we have a great backup. Tim Pierce, one of our staff members, has volunteered to say a few words to us and for us and to lead us in a prayer. So Tim will come forward and do that for us. When you see Tim finished, I'll ask Officer Ott from Cobb County Police Department to come forward and lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. When the officer comes to the middle of the room, please stand as you're able and we'll have our pledge. Tim, welcome and thank you.
You're welcome. When I was assistant pastor in a church in Northern Ohio, I used to conduct several meetings, and church meetings can be quite interesting. And there was always a verse I tried to lead my meetings with. It was in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15, and it starts out saying, "Speak the truth with love." So God wants us to be honest, be passionate, but he wants us to speak that with love and kindness. I think that every meeting needs to have that with it. Shall we pray? Our Heavenly Father, when we come to you today, we thank you so much for your love and kindness to us. You loved us so much, you sent your Son for our salvation. We pray as we have this meeting today, you'll give wisdom to our commissioners. You'll give wisdom to those that come to this podium and speak and are passionate about what they want. So we pray, Lord, that all of our speech will be with love and kindness. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Officer Ott. First on the agenda this morning will be our consent agenda. These are cases that the Planning Commission and the zoning staff have already fully investigated and for which all the pertinent issues seem to have been resolved and there are no known folks in opposition. The zoning administrator, Mr. John Peterson, this is John raising his hand off to my left here, will read those cases into the record and he will ask if there's anyone here wishing to make comment on or is in opposition to that particular case. If there is, we may then elect to pull the case from the consent agenda and we would then hear it in its regular numerical sequence. Next, we will hear cases that were either held or continued from a previous hearing. And lastly, we'll get into our regular cases, and again, those are always heard in their regular numerical sequence. Applicants will be asked to come forward and identify themselves for the record and be sworn in if necessary before they give their testimony. The opposition then likewise will be asked to come forward, identify themselves, be counted for the record, and sworn in as well before they give their testimony. When a case number is called by Mr. Peterson, you'll need to come forward and present yourselves to Jason Campbell. Jason, raise your hand. Jason on the front row will take care of the swearing in for you. So he'll address you to come forward and also sign his book so that we can get the correct spelling of your names. So if you speak, be sure you do sign our book. Please be aware that each side, both pro or con, has 10 minutes collectively. That's not 10 minutes each, that's 10 minutes collectively to present your cases. We like to stick to that as best we can because many times we have lots of cases to hear and we like to move them along as best we can. So be mindful of the length of your comments. And remember, as you're speaking before us, that is not the time for rebuttal. You're not here to ask us questions, you're here to present your case. We may, however, call you back up to clarify a point or to ask you some specific questions. We do that frequently. So that's the way we like to work. Mr. Peterson, any other instructions for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are a few more things that need to be addressed before we start the hearing. There is one case on today's printed agenda which has been withdrawn without prejudice, will not be heard today. It's rezoning case Z81 of 2017. This case has been withdrawn without prejudice, it will not be heard today. There are a number of cases on today's printed agenda which have been continued by the staff, will not be heard today. First case is rezoning case Z56 of 2017, Oak Hall Companies LLC. That case was continued by the staff until the April 3rd, 2018 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z56 of 2017 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z3 of 2018, Punky Poo LLC. That case was continued by the staff until the April 3rd, 2018 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z3 of 2018 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z7 of 2018, 3103 ND LLC. That case was continued by the staff until the April 3rd, 2018 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z7 of 2018 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z8 of 2018, Lloyd Development Services. That case was continued by the staff until the April 3rd, 2018 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z8 of 2018 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z11 of 2018, Aziz Farista. That case was continued by the staff until the April 3rd, 2018 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z11 of 2018 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z16 of 2018, Vining Storage LLC. That case was continued by the staff until the April 3rd, 2018 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z16 of 2018 will not be heard today. SLEP number 2 of 2018, 3103 ND LLC. That case was continued by the staff until the April 3rd, 2018 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So SLEP 2 would not be heard today. Finally, SLEP 4 of 2018, Vining Storage LLC. That case was continued by the staff until the April 3rd, 2018 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So SLEP 4 would not be heard today. Mr. Chairman and Board, there is one case on today's agenda in which the applicant has requested the board to continue their case. That's rezoning case Z12 of 2018, Lloyd Development Services. The applicant is present and they are asking to continue the case to work on the plan, Mr. Chairman and Board.
That's yours. Do you have any comments on that?
No, I agree with the continuation. They're working on the plan and working with the neighbors, so I would make a motion that we allow this to be continued until the April meeting.
Okay, so Z12 has been recommended for a continuance. We have a second. All in favor of that? Okay, so let me just read these back into the record. I'd like to do this to be sure everyone understands. These cases will not be heard today, so if you hear for any of these cases, we will not be taking them up today. That's Z81, Z56, Z3, Z7, Z8, Z11, Z16, SLUP 2 and 4, and then added to the list is also Z12. Will not be heard today.
Okay. I would like to ask the people in today's audience, if you have a cell phone, please turn the volume off on your cell phone. The ringing does interfere with broadcast and presentations. So if you have a cell phone, please put the volume on mute. Any person wishing to speak before the Board of Commissioners must file a campaign contribution disclosure statement. If within the 2 years immediately preceding the filing of a rezoning application, a campaign contribution totaling $250 or more was made to a current member of the Board of Commissioners. Additional information about this is located on the table in the back of the room. And I want to remind applicants, opposition, or any interested party that information is due to the board the Wednesday prior to the hearing. Any information submitted after the Wednesday due date may or may not be considered by the board at their discretion. And with that, Mr. Chairman and Board, I'm ready to start the consent agenda.
Okay, go ahead, John, please.
Thank you. Cobb County Planning Commission zoning hearing consent agenda for March 6, 2018. Rezoning case Z6, Chastain Self-Storage. Request rezoning from GC with stipulations to GC with stipulations for the purpose of a climate-controlled self-service storage facility in land lot 364, the 16th district. The property is located on the south side of Chastain Road, east of the I-575 ramp. Planning Commission recommends approval to the GC zoning district, subject to the following conditions. Site plan received by the zoning division on December 6, 2017, with the district commissioner approving minor modifications. Variance to waive the required 40-foot landscape buffer abutting the residentially zoned properties. Fire Department comments and recommendations, Water and Sewer Division comments and recommendations, Stormwater Management Division comments and recommendations, and Department of Transportation comments and recommendations. Is the applicant present? Let the record show the applicant is here. Is there anyone here opposed to rezoning case Z6? Let the record show there's no one opposed. And Mr. Chairman, Board, there was a letter from the attorney on this one, and I was wondering if the board would be okay if we added that also. It's the letter from Mr. James Bailey dated March 1st, 2018. Z6. Okay, so we,
Judy, you're okay with that, I'm assuming? Okay, yeah, that's fine. We'll add that to the record.
okay. Rezoning case Z10, Atlanta Road Property LLC, request rezoning from GC to LI for the purpose of a specialized contractor's office in land lot 352 of the 17th District. The property is located on the southwest side of Atlanta Road, south of Miller Avenue. Planning Commission recommends approval to the LI zoning district, subject to the following conditions. Site plan received by the zoning division on February 16, 2018, with the district commissioner approving minor modifications. Landscape office use only. District commissioner to approve the building color in the landscape plan. Variances as outlined in the zoning division comments. No heavy equipment be kept on site. No outdoor storage to the front of the building, with outside storage behind the building to be approved by the zoning division manager. Owner developer applicant to install paved driveway aprons, which are to be approved by Cobb DOT. The existing sign to be removed fronting Atlanta Road and be replaced with a new ground-based monument-style sign, at least 1 foot off the right-of-way. Fire Department comments and recommendations, Water and Sewer Division comments and recommendations, Stormwater Management Division comments and recommendations, and Department of Transportation comments and recommendations. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed to rezoning case Z10? Let the record show there's no one opposed. SLEP 1, Chastain Self-Storage, request a special land use permit for the purpose of a climate-controlled self-storage facility in land lot 364 of the 16th District. The property is located on the southeast corner of Chastain Road and the ramp from I-575. Planning Commission recommends approval, subject to site plan received by the zoning division on December 6, 2017, with the district commissioner approving minor modifications. Variance to waive the required 40-foot landscape buffer abutting residentially zoned properties. Fire Department comments and recommendations. Water and Sewer Division comments and recommendations. Stormwater Management Division comments and recommendations. Department of Transportation comments and recommendations. And a letter from Mr. James Bailey dated March 1st, 2018. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed to SLUP 1? Let the record show there's no one opposed. And that completes the consent agenda, Mr. Chairman and Board.
Okay, Judy, all of these happen to be yours. You want to make a motion?
Well, I need to, if y'all would allow me, I need to add a couple steps to Z6 as it pertains to the Chastain.
Okay.
That the applicant would adhere to the 70% impervious surface. The landscape plan to include landscaping around the wrought iron fence, which would be in the front of the building. And then the rear of the building to have final approval by the district commissioner by using a combination of brick and stucco.
That's on 6, right?
That's Z6.
6, okay. Any other comments on any of the others?
No.
No, they're fine.
And then I do have one other request, and I'm not sure this is the place to do it. I wanted to check and see, if there's opposition to add one to the consent.
Okay. Okay, so that, Commissioner?
And that would be Z9.
Okay, let me just first check there's any opposition.
Okay.
Is there anyone here opposed to rezoning case Z9 of 2018, Green Park PCH Incorporated? Is there anyone opposed to this case? There's not.
You want to read it in the record and then we add it?
Okay. Rezoning case Z9, Green Park PCH Incorporated, request rezoning from LRO to O&I for the purpose of residential senior living, supportive in land lot 525 of the 16th District. The property is located on the northwest side of Sandy Plains Road, north of Ebenezer Road. Is there anyone here opposed to rezoning case Z9? Let the record show there's no one opposed. The applicant is present.
Thank you.
Excuse me, may I make a comment?
Sure.
In reviewing the RSL supportive, it requires a 3-acre minimum, and this parcel is not even 1 acre.
But this is not in the RSL, this is gonna be,
Pardon?
this is not RSL, it's gonna be in the O and I.
But on the agenda, it says,
It's gonna be O and I, I'm gonna zone it O and I on the consent agenda. O and I for this use only, which is allowed, is that not right, John?
That's correct. It is permitted in O&I.
but
That's why I'm doing the O and I. It said in addition to the existing, it's a good use for that corner, I don't know what else would you put a one-story, supportive care, except that, right there in that intersection. But I'm not asking for the RSL, I'm asking for the O and I.
Yeah, which makes it deleted to it.
Yeah, I'm gonna delete it to O and I.
but residential supportive living, still, that doesn't change the fact that it's 3 acres minimum.
But it's not RSL. I'm not asking for RSL. I'm asking for O and I. And I'm gonna delete it to O and I,
For
which
that
fits
For that
use
usage,
only, which is permissible under O and I. If I was asking for the RSL, it
realize
would be
that.
different. But I'm not. So with that, John, I would like to make that subject to the letter of January the 10th. It be deleted to the O and I for this use only. District Commissioner have final approval on the design of the one-story building.
Okay, we have, I'm sorry. Too many buttons up here. Oh, we have a motion on the
Yes.
table, right, for all three,
Yes,
with the alterations and changes that you proposed.
correct.
Okay, do we have a second? I'm sorry.
Yes, 4 cases.
4 cases, I'm sorry,
Separate.
for 4 cases with the one that Judy added. So we have a second from Galt.
For discussion.
For discussion, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just like to put on the record that I need to recuse myself from Z6, SLUP 1, and also Z5, which will come up later, because of representation on a personal matter.
Okay, so noted. Anyone else? Discussion?
I agree with the 3 original cases on the consent agenda, but I cannot support Z9.
Okay, so noted. Anyone else?
That's not unusual.
Okay, let's call for the vote. Okay, Thea, is that the way you intended to vote?
Well, I don't want to vote no on everything.
Okay, I think we need 2 separate. Don't we know, we need to break that out?
No,
No.
Thea's comment is acceptable, so
Okay.
she's voting yes to the consent. But,
Except for Z9.
Sorry.
She's voting no on Z9.
But not, she's
So
opposing
Z9 needs a
Z9.
separate
So
motion.
that's okay, you're
That's what I'm
good.
saying. Z9 needs a separate motion because.
No, no.
It doesn't.
No,
No.
the clerk can indicate it
So
was a
that bec-
4-1 vote on that
You're-
one.
On that one
Correct.
alone?
Right.
Okay,
Correct.
Madam Clerk, you got that? Okay, a little confusion, we got it now. Okay, so we've all registered our vote. Thank you very much. John, what's next, please?
Yes, sir. Moving into the continued case agenda. Rezoning case Z84 of 2017, Randy E. Pimsler requests a rezoning from R20 to FST for the purpose of townhomes in land lot 410 of the 18th District. The property is located on the north side of Hillcrest Drive, east of South Gordon Road. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed to rezoning case Z84? Is there anyone here opposed to rezoning case Z84? Let the record show there's no one here, Mr. Chairman.
John, you might want to ask anyone here in favor.
Is anyone here in favor of rezoning case Z84?
We know the speaker is, but, okay, that's fine. Go ahead, please. Good morning. Give us your name, please.
Good morning. I'm Randy Pimsler, Pimsler Haas Architects, 455 Glen Iris Drive. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commission members. I appreciate the opportunity to present this application to rezone 260 Hillcrest from R20 to RA5. At the suggestion of Commissioner Porter, we modified this application from the original FST that we discussed and reviewed last month. 2 variances are requested at this time. One to allow for a 5-unit building on the west side of the property, and the second is to allow for a 4-foot reduction in the front yard setback adjacent to Hillcrest, where the deceleration lane moves slightly to the north of the property. In my opinion, we've worked diligently to address the concerns expressed throughout this process, starting with the initial community meeting back in December, and then follow up with both Commissioners Porter and Commissioner Cupid. We've modified the original design from a 3-story structure that fronted on Hillcrest to 2-story units with 4-sided architecture. We've moved away from private roads to public roads now, with all of the associated right-of-ways and required setbacks and cul-de-sacs at both ends of the public road. We've added amenities, fencing, and landscaping per the suggestions of both the community and the commissioners. There's been an ongoing concern. I believe you all received an email to this effect about the sanitary. If we could go to the next slide, please. This shows, this was provided by the county to us for our use and reference. If you'll notice, we're 260 in the upper left corner of this slide. There's a green sewer line that's shown with an easement. That's at the southern edge of the school that's to the north of our property. And that really does appear to be the most viable sanitary connection. The invert for that yellow manhole that's right adjacent to the northeast corner of our property is at approximately 1038. Our site ranges from 1070 to 1040. So we haven't done a detailed grading plan at this point in time, but we really do not see that this will be an obstacle in terms of the development of the property. And of course, as we get farther into civil engineering, we'll certainly have to address this concern in greater detail. But if you go to the next slide, please. This is the detail that we received, again, from the county very generously. There's a north arrow. It's that dark spot in the middle of this slide. And just above it is that sanitary manhole that I was making reference to. And it's very hard to read that, but in a print, it does indicate that that invert is at approximately 1038. So we really do feel that we've tried to address the sanitary issue. And as discussed last month, that's kind of our problem following the hopeful rezoning of the property. But we do think this is addressable. We've worked diligently to, if you go to the next slide, please. We've worked diligently to try to address the concerns of adjacent neighbors with regards to the, impact of this project on their property. We have, in my opinion, fairly heavy landscape buffers. We've agreed to a 40-foot naturally maintained landscape buffer, which would be across the northeast or the northern boundary of our property up to that guest parking area. And then we drop down to a 20-foot landscape buffer. We have 20-foot landscape buffers on the east and the west. And of course, that doesn't include the additional 20-foot yards that we've outlined for the property. So the buildings are 40 to 50 feet away from most of the yards, and the front yard is maintained at a 50-foot front yard setback. Again, if you go to the next slide, please. These are the floor plans. One more slide. We have 4-sided architecture represented here, 2-story buildings, variation in window fenestration, door treatment, garage door treatment. And the last slide is something that Commissioner Porter asked us to provide, a kind of a typical view of the 4-story building from the street, showing the fencing, which was on the initial site plan that you had in your packet, landscaping, shrubbery on both sides of the proposed fencing. And we really think that along with the right-of-way improvements, sidewalk adjustments, the turn lanes, decel lane, that this project does fit very nicely with the future land use plan for this area, and we would appreciate your support for this rezoning.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pensler.
Thank you.
Galt, I believe this is yours. You want to handle our discussion, please? I think we did, but we can do it again. Just for the record, anyone in opposition to Z84? Okay, not seeing and hearing it, it is back to this board. Galt, if you'll handle our discussion.
Okay, and, I appreciate you looking into the sewer issue. And I did talk, we had an email that all of us received from Bill and Lori Dennington yesterday, and their biggest issue in the email was the sewer. And I did talk to them by phone yesterday. They said they weren't going to be able to make it here today, but they're still in opposition. They were here last month. I explained to them that we don't, as a policy, ask people to engineer the sewer system before they have zoning because of all the costs that's involved. But I do feel like they've made a good effort to go through that. I think we've worked through all the details. Does anybody have any questions? So you can have a seat then. Won't make you stand there. Just a couple more comments. One, I do want to thank the applicant for working hard to adjust the plan and change it. The initial plan I saw, I just didn't like at all. And the 3-story architecture just wasn't going to fit the area. So I think they really did listen to the community as much as they could. I know there's some people who would prefer single-family houses here still, but this site's not really well laid out for that. And this does fit well within the land use plan. So there's, in addition to the 2 variances that Randy mentioned, there is one more variance, and that is to allow the individual lots to have a 20-foot rear setback instead of 40, but with the requirement that there be at least 40 feet from the existing building lines, with 20 of that being a buffer essentially. Or that, so they really are staying further away from the property lines, but this gives more protection to the neighbors because that buffer is going to be owned by the association versus individual property owners, which will make it, more protection, less likely to get interfered with. And we talked about 2-story. Because sewer's been such a big issue, when I make the motion, I'm going to make motion that all sewer to be gravity flow and no lift stations, because that's been such a big issue. And unless anybody has anything else, I'll just make a motion. With regard to Z84, I recommend deletion to RA5, subject to all the following: all staff comments and recommendations not otherwise in conflict, all stipulations in the letter and accompanying elevations from Randy E. Pimsler dated February 27th, 2018, not otherwise in conflict. Site plan with the last revision date of February 27th, 2018, received with the stipulation letter, with the corrected buffer to 20 feet for the western part of the northern property line. And it's slightly confusing because there's 2 plans out there with the same date, because they corrected it there. But they were showing it as a 40-foot landscape. Well, they wrote 20 foot, but physically drawn was 40 foot, so they revised it to show physically drawn 20 feet. Maximum of 31 units. Variance is listed in the stipulation letter. That was A. B, individual lots to have a 20-foot minimum rear building setback. C, minimum rear setback distance from site property lines, so from the outside boundaries to RA5 standards, except as noted in the stipulation letter, which that was for the decel lane. Maximum of 2 stories, and all sewer to be gravity flow, no lift stations shall be allowed. And that's the motion.
Okay, can we get a second? Got a second from Ms. Williams. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. Okay, Randy, good luck to you. Okay, John, let's move to the next one, please.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and as a reminder, Skip will need to recuse himself from this one, so I'm going to ask him to leave the podium and go to the back while we handle this case.
Rezoning case Z5, Pulte Home Company LLC requests a rezoning from PSC to RM12 for the purpose of townhouses in land lot 86 of the First District. The property is located on the southwest corner of Old Town Parkway and Old Town Lane. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed to rezoning case Z5? Let the record show there are 2 people here in opposition. All those wishing to address the board, please come forward to be sworn in.
Okay, Mr. Ballard, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is James Bally, and I'm here today on behalf of the applicant, Pulte Homes, for a Z5 John Whelan's Homes and Neighborhood Development for 43 single-family homes that will be for sale only. To let everyone know where this property is located, it's at the intersection of Lower Roswell Road and Johnson Ferry Road. You see it there designated as site. To the left is PSC. It's currently zoned PSC, and then it has NRC and CRC around it. Get a better idea, this is a clear aerial photograph. The site is there outlined in blue. Immediately adjacent to it is an approved future office building for Northside Hospital. It's adjacent to a McDonald's, a Bank of America, and a PNC, and then to the right of it is the athletic club. Currently on the site right now, as it sits, could be developed tomorrow. It's been approved for approximately 100,000 square foot office building. PSC has a 75-foot height limitation, and that before you is the approved elevation as it's zoned today, which appears to be clearly at least 50, if not over 50 feet. I want to direct everyone's attention to what this really is. This is not a individual small zoning. This is all part of a 51-acre mixed-use development that included high-density residential. Some of you may not have heard that or be aware of it, but in 1982, that's how it came in and was approved in 1983. It included 21.52 acres of residential along with a mix of office and other. As you see there, designated to the right, almost immediately adjacent to our site, it was approved and zoned as a RM8 zoning in 1982, which is approved as a high-density residential, and we all know in Cobb County, high-density residential allows 5 to 12 units per acre. So when this mixed-use development came in and was designed and approved, it was designed to include high-density residential. Immediately to the left, I think, is something important to look at when you're reviewing this application. Already approved is another 80,000 square foot office building, again with a 75-foot height restriction. You can see the difference in the pads there. To the left is the existing north side building. To the right is the smaller pad directly adjacent to us, Z5 being there to the right. It's already approved, height limitation of 75 feet. If you look at the building there, that is the current north side building. The second approved building adjacent to our site is designed to be the same size and at least that height. I think if you look at those building pads, you can tell that the building immediately adjacent to Z5 is going to have to be higher because it's the same square footage but smaller building pad. So we're proposing to replace that 100,000 square foot office tower with 43 single-family homes. They're going to have numerous options, including elevators, so they'll be available for seniors if they wish to purchase them and include that option in the home that's selected. You can see the elevations before you. We think they're going to have a base that starts about $550,000 and an average sales price of $700,000. There'll be different styles allowed. This is one of them. You can see high-quality products, 2-car garages. Every home will be for sale and have a minimum of 3,000 square feet. Interiors, you see, this is all in the letter that we've submitted. Upscale, superior interior options That'll be available to all of the prospective homeowners there. We have a landscape plan that's been submitted. What you see there is an updated landscape plan that I got last night. That will be updated and filed with this application before the Board of Commissioners hearing, and will be subject to review and approval at plan review. We have been in contact with the immediately adjacent neighbor, Old Town Athletic Club, who submitted a letter in support. And just so everyone knows, the RM8 that was approved was not developed because Old Town ultimately utilized that for tennis courts. So the high-density residential that was planned for and designed for this area has not yet been built. Let's talk about reduced traffic. There's some traffic concerns. Z5, these are Cobb County DOT numbers, not my traffic engineer. Our plan, if approved, would generate 250 trips a day. The current zoning, if built, would generate 1,072 trips per day, a massive increase in the traffic down Old Town Parkway. And then you're going to have to remember that there's already another large building approved that's going to generate roughly that same amount of trips per day. So we think with Z5, it helps the traffic situation drastically out there. We have agreed to a ride-in and ride-out entrance out of our proposed subdivision. And I'm going to have to talk about a couple things right now because we've heard a little bit of this, and I need to address it as an attorney. And you've heard all of these things, how much better I respectfully submit our plan is to the neighbors than 100,000 square foot. Why are we not recommending an approval on Z5 when you have a reduction in impervious, massive reduction in traffic, $700,000 for sale homes, replacing 312 parking spaces? We have numerous positive variances voluntarily agreed to by Pulte. And I'll submit to you that we're treating the future land use map as an illegal litmus test. That's not my words. That's the words of the Superior Court, and it's not in a case involving Gwinnett County. It involved Cobb County, and an order by Judge Schuster said it's illegal to use land use plan as anything more than a general guide, and it is not a zoning ordinance. It is a guide to continued growth. The court went on to say that doing so, you impermissibly elevated the land use plan to the rule of law. Then the court reversed the Board of Commissioners' denial and remanded for approval. That's important because that was a Cobb County case. So when you look at this plan, and the only objection to it from a lot of quarters is it doesn't comply with the land use plan. We have to remember the land use plan is only a guide. We cannot illegally apply it. Could not, should not be illegally applied as a main reason for denial in any case, not just this case. And also I want to address, there's been some comments about variances on this application. Limited variances do not make a rezoning improper. We've got to focus and remember that. Why? Because conditions on zonings which are not in the code are variances. I'm not going to go through all the legal discussion, but we do allow conditional zoning in Georgia. However, they've got to be related to the zoning application. However, in Cobb County, I think everyone here would agree with me, everyone in recent memory has included variances we just call stipulations. And no interested third party ever wants a zoning to occur to the code. Instead, variances are demanded via stipulations. We've got to be intellectually honest about this. We ask for things that are not in the code. If you build an RM12 to the code, you wouldn't have rental restrictions. You'd have no requirement for architecture. You'd have no garage use, no no HOA, no requirement for underground utilities, no requirement for architectural lighting, no construction vehicle parking restrictions, no requirement for washing stations, no designated contact person for traffic, and no underground detention requirement. That would be if we built something to the code. We don't do that. We come in and we have a lot of positive variances that we call stipulations. So we need to look at an application. If you're looking at variances to the code, then you need to look on the left-hand side as you come back toward the good on all the positive variances we call stipulations. And let's talk about a few of those. We've submitted a letter, and I'm not going to go through them all. We're going to have a mandatory HOA with landscaping and the entrance, ground-based monument sign, landscape plan to be approved by the district commissioner, elevations which are attached, including a prohibition on inferior materials, and approval by the district commissioner, no stacking of construction, no work on Sunday, and numerous other protections contained within the stipulation variance letter timely filed with staff. And all of those variances are voluntarily agreed to by Pulte. They're not in the code. There's something they're agreeing to do. So when we're talking about the code, we've got to talk about variances to it that work both ways. We can't simply talk to it on one side. I want to briefly touch on, I'm about out of time, the benefit of this mixed-use development change requested by Z5. We have a reduction, according to Cobb DOT, of roughly 75% in removing 822 daily trips. Remember, another building is coming with another 900 to 1,000 trips adjacent. 43 townhomes instead of a 4-story, 100,000 square foot office building. The high-quality homes with a base and 550 and up to 700 will increase the value of the surrounding property, including the FST townhomes that are already in that development. And there's no negative effects, I would submit to you, of this change that anyone can point to with evidence. However, we have agreed to numerous variances to the code, and Pulte is not attempting to build
Mr.
it to the
Bally,
code.
time has run.
Thank you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield for any questions and request you approve Z5.
Thank you, Mr. Bally. Let's hear from the opposition now, please. Good morning.
Good morning.
Give us your name, please.
My name is Sarah Patterson, and I am a resident of the Hamptons of Old Town, which is near the site. My biggest opposition to this project is the fact that it is too dense. As you can see on the site plan, that there's already a Northside Hospital urgent care, and they're going to be building an office building soon, and then we have the regular subdivisions within Old Town already existing, and adding more homes would increase, I believe would increase the traffic. I've lived in this subdivision for my entire life, so about 24 years. So without another way to get out of the neighborhood, I feel like this project would be too intense for the existing entrance that we have, which is Johnson Ferry Road. So I think that's one of my biggest concerns with this project. If there isn't another way to get in or out of the neighborhood and adding more homes, it would, I don't think it would be a good idea. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson. Let's hear from our next speaker, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jill Flam. I'm the case manager for East Cobb Civic Association on Z5. I believe you all have received our comments on this proposed zoning. We agreed townhomes would be a nice addition to this area. However, our concerns are addressed with the density and some things that have changed in the stipulation letter from even the previous stipulation letter, which involved the office building. First of all, with regard to RM12, it is a zoning category that is allowed in high density or a rack, and we are talking an area that is fed by a local street on a roundabout. This will never be a rack. It doesn't have the access to the roads. But even looking beyond that, if you look at the surrounding areas, which are FST, the developed areas are all around 6 units per acre or under. What the applicant is asking for is an increase of over 66% in that density for this project. Even if you considered another category such as FST 10, they're asking for more units than that would allow. If you strictly went by the code for 10 units per acre, that would be a reduction of at least 3 units. We feel that this proposed project needs to lose a couple of units to pull it in line with the surrounding area. With regard to price points, we all know price points are unenforceable. To get a $700 per unit average in the stip letter, they said they are starting at the high 500s. You would have to have units that sold over $800,000. It also is very hard to control what gets put inside a unit. So therefore, saying there are upgrades, we have no idea what is going to go in there. With regard to the three-sided architecture, even the townhomes along Johnson Ferry are four-sided architecture. And that was stipulated and requested by the commissioner so that what you see from Johnson Ferry is four-sided architecture. What you will see from Old Town Parkway as proposed is perhaps hardy plank. We don't know. We don't have rear renderings. So we propose that at least the architecture from Old Town Parkway be four-sided. The site plan in the stipulation letter, the site plan referenced is the one that was submitted with the preliminary application. However, the site plan that we have been given by the applicant is dated 12/13, so we're confused as to which site plan we're referring to. We have no idea what the completion data is for the townhomes. At this point, this is a condominium development rather than fee simple, like the other subdivisions. We'd like to know why. We also have a question about, all of a sudden, we're discussing blasting hours. This wasn't discussed with the office park. Why is this being considered? One of the things, and I'm going to ask for some help putting this up, is a landscape plan. The one by, apparently, that is being proposed today, we haven't seen, obviously. But what is being shown to you right now, this is a landscape plan that was approved with the office park. The upper right-hand corner is full of plantings with specifics, their caliber, and as you can see along Old Town Parkway, which is over also on the upper right-hand side, there is heavy, heavy landscaping. And what I'm showing you now, this is what is being proposed by the applicant. Having going out to the site, those orange trees are existing mature trees today. So we're not seeing a lot of landscaping. We're not seeing a lot of hiding of what will be the backs of the townhomes from Old Town Parkway. So what will easily be visible, this is the back, so you'll see the cars parked in the driveways. Whatever else you park in the driveway, perhaps garbage cans if they're not kept in the garage. We feel that this landscape plan is imperative and it needs some detail. What is being planted and size, caliber, et cetera. Going down, I'll see if I can quickly, in the time allowed, go through the stipulation alterations we are requesting. That the use of garages as living space be part of the covenants. Stipulation 9, we'd like to see everything irrigated. Stipulation 11, with regards to stacking, it needs to be on Old Town Parkway and Johnson Ferry Road. And to the second part of that, during the second sentence needs during construction and delivery hours, and also there's no stipulation with regard to construction worker vehicles need to be parked on the site, no parking of any construction trucks or vehicles, either worker or delivery, to be parked or stacked on surrounding subdivision streets. Then stipulation 13 seems to be taken from the old stipulation document with regard to one building. We're proposing a change as to when certificates of occupancy can be given. Stipulation 15, what we have listed were the approved construction hours with the original zoning, Monday to Friday, 8 to 8, Saturday, 10 to 4, no work on Sundays, holidays, Halloween, first day of Cobb County schools without district commissioner prior approval. We do have children. They are going to be out and around on those days, especially the first day of school with the buses. An additional stipulation that was also agreed to in the past was the delivery of large equipment or vehicles, not before 8, not after 8 on Monday through Friday, and not on the weekends. Stipulation 18, with regard to what is a minor modification. For the concern of the neighbors, it's what they will see from Old Town Parkway. So if you relocate a structure closer to the property line of an adjacent property or Old Town Parkway, we recommend that this not be a minor modification, and it would have to come back as in other business items. changed to read, increase the height of a building along Old Town Parkway, also not a minor modification, and change the access location along Old Town Parkway, also not a minor modification. We would love to see rear renderings, so you see what you're going to, the view will be from Old Town Parkway, elevations, and once again, a landscape plan that has some specifics associated with it, as well as enhanced screening along Old Town Parkway. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jill, very much. Specificity.
Thank you. Not my word
You
today.
did good. You did good. Thank you very much. Just for the record, anyone else? Well, I tell you, we're out of time, so we're going to need to close off this portion of the hearing and back to this board. I'll handle the discussion on this. James, why don't you, where are you seated? Come on back up. Let's hit a few of the points that were made by our speakers and see if we can address some of those, and then I have a few others myself.
All right.
Landscaping, on the plan, you show trees that are highlighted in red or orange, whatever the color is. Those are existing trees. I know I think you plan to save some of those existing trees, correct?
That's correct, and we'd file all that in plan review, and the county arborist would have to approve it. I apologize for the one slide on my presentation is a different, more specific, I won't try to say specificity because I'm not sure I could either, but if you could put it up for me, that shows some more detail, and we're certainly going to have that submitted. We anticipate a new stipulation letter that includes many of the things that Ms. Lamb just talked about. We try not to have numerous stipulation letters. The rule says Wednesday at noon, but we certainly anticipate being able to include a majority, if not all of those, in a new stipulation.
Well, you and I had this conversation about landscaping. I tend to agree landscaping can make or break not only the appearance, but how these things sell. And the neighbors that live there now, as our first speaker does, are going to have to look at this for quite some time. Landscaping that faces Johnson's Ferry, that needs to be enhanced. There's really no question about it. Even though there will be a large building, very tall, 4 or 5 story building located on that vacant lot next to this, you still have to look at this as you come in on that main road up to the roundabout. So when you focus on your landscaping plan, be sure that side that faces Johnson Ferry gets enhanced landscaping. Talk to me about blasting. Do y'all anticipate blasting on the side?
We don't anticipate blasting. Every time I say we don't anticipate blasting and leave it out of a stipulation letter, then someone comes and asks, well, will you please put the blasting stipulation back in, which is just in there to say that if any occurred, everybody will be notified in a timely manner. That's the only reason that is in here. We don't anticipate any blasting at all.
I'm not aware of, and maybe you are, maybe John is, I'm not aware of any blasting that's occurred in the area for construction that's going on in the last decade or so. Okay. How about rear elevations? What are we going to expect to see on that fourth side?
It's going to be a mixture of what everyone calls hardy plank with brick columns. What we're doing is we're stipulating, I think in the letter, that the district commissioner has to approve them, which would include elevations on the rear.
Okay. What's around this? I know we have the athletic club off to one side. What do we see on the back, on what really is the backside of this on Lower Roswell Road? What's there?
You have the McDonald's, the Bank of America. I think there's another PNC Bank maybe. Really, you have commercial uses that back up to it from Lower Roswell Road. Okay, so you have commercial on Lower Roswell, mostly one, maybe a 2-story bank backing up to this. And you have the athletic club on the other side, a parking lot and a vacant lot on the other, and directly across the street you have the roundabout and what else? We have, on the other side of the roundabout, you have the office. More office.
Office part.
Office, right.
Most of those are 2-story, I guess. 2 to 3, I think. And remember the adjacent north side building that's coming. Okay. Density, if I heard from, and I did hear from a few people in the community, including ECCA, density is always first at the top of the list. How do you address that? 43 was going to give you a little bit better than 10 units per acre. Most of the FST in the area has been anywhere from 4 to 8. So yeah, it's a little bit high. Well, we're in a different time now than we were in 1982.
we have reached an engineering level that allows for that without a decrease in quality. You're going to have 4-story, high-value homes here. Also, you've got to remember, this was designed and approved as a mixed-use development, which included high-density residential. It was approved for high-density residential with no rental restrictions. So we think $700,000 average sales price homes with a 10-point-something unit to the acre and taking away 100,000 square foot office space is certainly in line with what was designed for this mixed-use development when it was initially approved.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for James? Thea, go ahead.
The proposed pricing seems to fluctuate from big numbers to bigger numbers. Can you share with us other townhouse houses that Pulte has developed in that price range?
Yeah, this exact product, and this is a John Whelan Homes and Neighborhood Design. The Mooney Design Studios associated with them. The landscaping is going to be John Whelan Homes and Neighborhood Landscaping. But this exact same product is being built in Sandy Springs, I believe now, with a higher sales price, if I'm not correct. I am correct. I just was indicated. So in Sandy Springs is where that is. And you've got to understand, typically an applicant comes in and says these are going to be $700,000 townhomes because that's the average. Well, I was asked by the chairman, and I believe that to be a reasonable request, that you talk about what the base price is. So when your base price is $550,000, that's with hardly any options. So you come in if you want an elevator, if you want certain options that you see, it goes up from there. And so that's why you're going to have hardly any, if any, that are going to be $550,000. With the vast majority and the average sales price being $700,000. I can guarantee you that's not an inflated number for this procedure because Pulte is required to go through a detailed analysis because they're a publicly traded company on each project. Those are the numbers that they came out with. They put that out there, and that's what we're at.
Okay, and then since you and I discussed variances yesterday, would like to comment on what you said in your presentation earlier. What you listed as variances in your stipulation letter were all on the positive side from
Right.
your perspective because those things are not listed in the code. But you failed to mention the variances that occur that are on the negative side, such as this type of development does belong in a RAC. You talk about reducing the impervious, and you're comparing that to a big office building and claiming that you're going to reduce the impervious, but the impervious that's going to be on there with this zoning is higher than what is in the code. So we all know that we have statistics and we can state them, to our advantage. So are you suggesting that perhaps the county needs to do away with the code and let the stipulation letter rule that is developed by the attorneys?
I might go along with that. I'm not sure the Supreme Court or the legislature would do it. What I'm saying is, sure, there's variances on this problem. Let's talk about impervious surface. This was designed and is retained with the master retention in this mixed-use development at 84% impervious. It's already engineered for that. We're going to have a reduction in that impervious surface. So that's a variance, but I would say it's a positive variance. We're not going to be at the list of the impervious surface that a RM12 would be if it was next to a R20, but we're going to be less than what is there now and less than what it's engineered for. So that's a positive variance in my mind. On the land use plan, I understand that that guide says RAC versus CAC. I understand that. This has been a CAC since Jimmy Carter was in the White House, or at least Ronald Reagan. And we need to maybe take a look at some of those things. But remember, this is a mixed-use development designed to have high-density residential in it. And so I would submit that we're in line with the plan that was approved, and it's been developed with that in mind, so.
I guess our issue seems to be with the definition of variance.
Mhm.
In the old days, a variance required a hardship for some specific reason. So just because the things that you all choose to put in your letters that really don't address, I think, the things that are more important as to the code, because the public has expectations that, okay, if this is the zoning, this is what I should expect to be developed, but that's not been the case.
Yeah, and I think that you would find a lot of developers who said, I'm going to come in with a zoning that's RM12 to the code, and that's it. I think you'd find a lot of them saying, great, let's do it. But we don't ever do that. We put more requirements on them that are in the code. And then when they come in and say, we need this variance, which there's no evidence of a negative effect on home value or anything, we don't talk about all of these other restrictions that are not in any of our codes that we make them do. The law defines those as variances. The Supreme Court, the legislature says you can do that provided that those conditions are put on to address a negative effect of a zoning. So it happens on both sides. All I'm saying is there's some projects with too many variances. There's some projects with some that are addressed by the positive. So we can't, I'm just asking that we should not come in and look at something and say this is a bad zoning because has this many variances, or we should get it because we've got these many positive variances. They're all variances. We need to look at the project on its own 2 feet and whether it fits, whether it's going to hurt the neighbors, improve traffic, improve property value. In this case, I say that the balance falls to the positive, and that's all I'm saying. The analysis will be different in each case. And the law requires that.
And I guess we have to agree to disagree, but your variances, as you describe them, are not long-term, such as setting a precedent by allowing a density that is not what it should be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah,
Quickly.
I got a couple questions. What is the length of the driveways for the individual units?
20 feet.
But you want a front setback of 15 feet? Or is that just on the main road?
I believe that's on the main road.
Okay, so
The
they are
current-
20 feet.
Right.
Okay, good. How many guest parking spaces are there?
The number required by fire,
So there's 22 then, I would guess?
23.
23 is.
23,
Yeah, we haven't asked for any variance from that.
okay. 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 I think I understand where you're coming from on the impervious. You're saying this was designed to have more originally, but it is a big variance from the RM8 code to 69.2% from 45%. So I can see what Thea is saying too, is it's a huge variance as well as, you know, some of the others. Okay, that's my
Okay,
questions.
Judy, anything?
I'll save the rest for
Okay, let's move on then. James, stay where you are in case another question comes up. Old Town, as James said briefly, but I want to give a little context here. Old Town was first conceived in 82 and came out of the ground in 1983. That's a long time ago, over 30 years ago. It was, at the time on Johnson's Ferry, it was an entirely different world up and down Johnson's Ferry Road, entirely different than what it is now. Johnson's Ferry wasn't even as wide as it is now. It came out of the ground as a mixed-use area. He said 20 acres. It was really more than 50 acres. The entire area was more than 50 acres. And it was designed to have some housing, mostly fee simple townhomes, hopefully some retail shopping, some office buildings which were built. That's the kind of thing they envisioned. They envisioned this being the Williamsburg style, which in the 80s was very popular. You don't see many people building this kind of complex using the Williamsburg style anymore. What you see is what James has shown us as being much more popular, and that is what sells. We do have a lot of two-story buildings in the area, some three-story, so height is an issue for me as it is. And the FST that was built there was, I think, exclusively FST 6, which gives you up to 6 units per acre, but we do have some that exceeded that. No real development has occurred in the Old Town area, though, in a long time, over a decade, except for the new medical building, which went in up on Johnson's Ferry Road a short time ago. There were people who didn't like the idea at the time, but the BOC loved it and they approved it. It came out of the ground, and now some of those same people are saying that was a real boon to the area. They like it. So much so that, as James indicated, there's going to be another building, probably a medical building. James, is that right?
That's correct.
Probably a medical building on the property behind the North Side Emergency Care and Office, Medical Office building. And it'll be about roughly the same size. It's going to be right next to this site. So it's going to essentially block the view of a great deal of this site when that building comes out of the ground later this year. So we have to keep that in mind. Also, as far as what is really visible and how heavy do we need the landscaping to be around this, we do need nice landscaping. It helps the appearance. It helps anybody that lives in the area. It helps those businesses that exist there today. So there's no question about that. However, everything that's there now is visible. Right now, it's visible from Johnson's Ferry. The office buildings, there's a huge parking lot behind the medical building. You can see the whole thing. So there's a lot that you can see. This site will be an enhancement to the area. This site has contained several different businesses over the last years. None of them have been very successful, and they come and they go, warehouses, offices, and so forth. Everyone has known for more than a decade this site needs residential. Now, it's not suited for single-family detached homes. It has to be something like what Pulte and John Whelan are proposing here. It needs to be townhome development, and I agree the density is a little on the high side. And there's some other issues that I think we need to discuss and possibly deal with, some of which we can deal with by altering the stipulation letter a little bit. Density is one of them. Density is being offered at a little over 10 units per acre, 10.5, something like that. All the residential units here, as I said, go from 4 to 8. However, I don't think a boost in density for this type of construction, which is much needed, and the community agrees is much needed in the area, is a problem. I don't see going to 10 units per acre as being a big issue. I just don't. I don't think that's an issue at all. Removing 1 or 2 units in order to get it down to 8 or 9 units, what good does that do? It doesn't improve traffic flow. It doesn't improve the appearance. So I don't know that that's a big issue. Height that didn't come up, I was surprised, didn't come up in our discussion earlier, I think may be an issue. Everything in the area is by and large 2. There are a few 3-story buildings, but I really think height might be an issue. They have proposed a maximum of 50 feet. I will tell you, knowing how this developer works, it might be over 50 feet. When you look at the ground, it sits higher. This elevation is higher than anything else in the area. You add to that a building that's above 50 feet or slightly above, and it will tend to tower over the area. That, to me, is a bigger problem, and I think needs to be addressed. So I am concerned about that. Mr. Bally has heard me say that to him. The architectural style, believe it or not, several people said, well, it's Williamsburg. Don't we need to keep it Williamsburg? No, we really don't. When we look at all of the townhome communities that we see, and we see lots of them over the last several years, we don't see Williamsburg being designed very often at all. We see this type of structure. It's modern. It's what sells. The Generation Xers and that group, millennials, people from 25 up to close to 50, those are the people that are married, 2 incomes. They're the folks who have the disposable money. They can buy this type of home, and that's what will happen here. So the architectural style should attract people, and I think that's okay. The variances, we have to look at what those variances are. Some of the variances that were mentioned are internal to the site, and they're very minor. I don't care about those, frankly. The ones that are exterior, that might be on the outside, are the ones that I think you have to be careful with. Galt mentioned the front setback. We would like to see 40 or 50 feet there. They're proposing 15, but if you look at the site plan, it's 15 feet only for a couple of the buildings. The rest of them are within code. So that's a variance, but it's not an egregious variance. We have a rear setback from 40 feet down to 20 feet. That is a variance from the code. But look at what's at the rear. That's why I asked James, what's along Lower Roswell Road? That's the rear of the property. You have a McDonald's, you have a couple of banks, you have a restaurant. Those people have all said, we don't care. We like it, we love it, as long as we get some new residents there that can shop with us and dine with us and so forth, we think it's just fine. So going down to 20 feet, plus beyond the 20 feet, you have really an overgrown area with lots of mature trees there that will help block that view anyway. And then the height is a variance that I do have a bit of a problem with. The comp plan, yes, this is in a CAC. We wish it was in a RAC, a Community Activity Center versus a Regional Activity Center. This would be allowed inside a Regional Activity Center. It's questionable for a CAC. However, the CAC designation, which worked in 1983 when this came out of the ground, really doesn't work here anymore. Look at Johnson's Ferry. Look how it's changed. And keep in mind, as Mr. Valley pointed out to us, the comprehensive plan is a guide. It is not an ordinance. It was put in place in the 80s. Does it apply now? It really doesn't. Look at what's happened on Johnson's Ferry. Look at what's happened just off Johnson's Ferry. We have lots of residential, lots of high-density residential. I don't really have a problem with this at all. CAC tends to lean toward medium-intensity office, retail, and commercial uses. Well, we know that in a CAC, which this is what the code says, office, retail, and commercial uses don't work on this site. It doesn't work. We've tried it. It doesn't work. And that building is sitting there empty today. As far as impervious goes, do you know the percentage of what's there now? I really don't, but I suspect it's 80%.
It's 84. It's 84, and that's
84%.
what it's engineered for.
And do you know what just this site will be if it's developed as you're proposing?
I think right at 70.
Okay, so it is an improvement, still a little high. It's high to the code. That brings up another point. Thea is right. You really can't compare what you're asking for and talk about the variances and compare it to a plan that might have been. There was a plan back in 2015 for an office building there that never came out of the ground. So to compare what you're proposing to that is not really that accurate. You have to compare it to what zoning category you're asking for. I'm not sure RM12 is the right zoning category for this. I batted around. I talked to John Peterson about if there's another FST, which we do have all in this area. We have FST 6 everywhere. If there's an FST zoning, that's fee simple townhome, that might fit better. FST 10 actually would work pretty well. It gives you your 10 units per acre. It doesn't change the variances, very slightly, but not enough to be significant. So that indeed might work better. Other issues had to do, Jill and I talked about this from ECCA, the entrance. And we talked about this at our work session. The entrance, where it's situated, unless we make it right in, right out only, and a hard right in, right out, is not a safe entrance. As you come out of this site, the tendency is going to be, if you're running late to work, you're going to go the wrong way on that roundabout. We do not want that. We want to force people to go around the correct way on the roundabout. Well, you can move the entrance some 30 or 40 feet to the east. That would solve it. But I think that's a mistake, because if you do that, you're eliminating quite a lot of the green space in front of these buildings, the lawn, the landscaping that they're proposing here. All you have to do is make this a hard right in, right out, which DOT knows fully how to do, and they can handle that at plan review. Three-sided architecture, I don't really have a problem when you consider the back sides of those, what they face. They don't face a residential community. They face a McDonald's and a bank. They face an athletic club. They face a vacant lot, and in the future, a high-rise office building. That doesn't concern me. Price points, I agree. Price points need to be nailed down. We don't need to say, as they did in the original application, these are going to be $700,000. There'll probably be some at that, but they're offered in the 5 to 550 range, and that's what we need to understand. There were those that requested that we take a hard look at traffic, which we did, and DOT was good enough to look at this for us. James put that up on the board a minute ago. This site would generate, if approved, this zoning, 250 trips a day, as opposed to what could have gone there at 1,100 trips a day. So I don't think this is going to be a major traffic impact. I know the young lady that spoke earlier, Ms. Patterson, was concerned about it. I would be surprised if this would cause a major problem in that area. So that's sort of my summary. Any other comments before I make a motion?
I'll make a couple. Given that FST requires actual road frontage for each unit, I really think the RM12 is a better category for this. The other thing I'd like to do, and did Rock just walk out of the room? I was gonna make sure he was okay with the layout and the design, because that concerns me. You know, it's obviously gonna be private streets, but I wanna make sure that from a fire safety, it's good. I think we've covered the impervious. The variances bother me. I think this is a very unique situation, though, that we normally don't see, where you're putting residential surrounded completely by commercial, but part is a mixed use. So I think I can live with the density here. You know, the land use plan's really a guide. CAC's probably the right thing for the area, but this is a unique feature, and it is interesting to note that it was originally planned to have an RM8 in it, and that was changed. So those are my comments, and I guess
I
we'll
do think
just.
the fire marshal is okay with this. I did receive some comments from him, and he said as long as we're sure that you guys are going to give us our parking spaces that we need, guest parking, he thought that it was adequate for turnaround and that sort of thing. Now, again, this will be handled. Here he comes now. We've been talking about you. This is from our fire marshal's department. Come on up.
Come
real
on
quick.
up, Rock.
We had a question about guest parking, which I think we've resolved. Does the fire department have any other issues with this general layout as far as access, turnaround? Have you looked at it? What do you think?
I'm Rock Tuller, I represent the fire marshal's office. I have looked at this. As long as the 20-foot driveways are there, the guest parking's provided at that ratio of 1 space for every 2 units. And then the roadways that run vertical in the line there are 24 feet wide to provide the aerial apparatus access. And that's what, that's what the plan shows.
And that's what we talked about. So I think we're probably going to be okay. Again, all of this, if it's approved here and by the BOC, goes to what we call plan review. And all this will be covered again to be sure that it's taken care of, so.
Okay, just
thank
want to
you.
make
Thank you,
sure,
Rob.
because it looked like long roads, so,
Okay.
without turnarounds.
Okay, I don't have anything else for these guys, so if we don't have any other questions. Judy?
Yeah, I just have a very brief comment. This is a unique piece of property in that most of this you can't see from the road. Either one of the roads you can't see from because it's interior. So this is one chance to get this thing right. I'm not so concerned about the price. Don't want to get into the price of the units because the market will adjust to that. The builder won't build unless he can sell them at a certain price, so I don't think that's a major concern of mine. I think the variances, because of the uniqueness of the property and what's surrounding it, it could have been a 5-story building or 4-story building. So the plan is good. I think we can do it either way. We could do it to an FST, or we could just leave it to RM12 to this plan. And I sort of like the RM12 to the plan would be because it's in a CAC. And so that would be what I would suggest doing.
Okay. I've toyed with both RM12 and FST 10, both, and really, there's no major advantage, really, one over the other from.
Just leave it the RM12 and do it to the plan because it's in a CAC. That would be what I would consider.
Okay.
And I also don't like the big variance that it's not public roads that's required by FST.
Exactly, and this will work for him anyway.
Well, if you look at all the other FST in the area, of which there's a lot, you had the same situation there.
I would
That-
say,
those-
Mr. Valley, do you
those were
really care one
approved.
way or the other, where it's FST or RM12?
We don't have an, as long as it's to that plan, but,
Yeah. Okay.
I
so you don't
hear,
have-
the board and will accept their decision.
Okay.
Okay, you can have a seat, James. Thank you very much. Okay, why don't we get this going here, then I'm gonna make a motion that we approve Z5 for RM12 to the plan as presented, subject to all the staff comments and recommendations, subject to the site plan submitted. I believe the date on the last plan I saw was December the 5th, subject to the landscape plan that was submitted today, dated today, and to the elevations that were attached, that were submitted, I don't know when those were submitted, frankly, it's a couple of weeks ago, but the elevations that we saw presented here today, with the following changes, alterations, and so forth to the STIP letter as follows. Under number 1, I mentioned I had a problem with the height. I want to change the last sentence there that, I want to delete the sentence that reads, while the current zoning allows structures of 75 feet, that really has nothing to do with this. I want to delete that sentence at all, but have it read after that, these homes shall be no taller than, or no higher than 45 feet. We're sort of splitting the difference there. I do think that's an issue from appearance and some other things. I want to do that, I believe. Let's go to item number 2 on the STIP letter, where we talk about garages, and at the end of the first sentence, add as to be enforced by the HOA. That simply says garages are for vehicle parking only. Let's see, I want to go to number 3 stays as is, so let's go to number 7, stipulation number 7. Has to do with covenants, landscaping, and so forth, and who's responsible for what. At the end of that, I'd like it to read that the HOA is responsible for the mail kiosk, all landscaping, plantings, and the oversight and control of the 10% rental restriction as described in number 4 above. They're all for sale with a maximum of 10% to be for rent. So this just says who's responsible for oversight of that 10% rental. Number 11 has to do with, let's see here, construction vehicles. It should read, vehicles on or along Old Town Parkway or Johnson's Ferry Road. Also, at the end of that sentence, number 11, all delivery and construction vehicles to be parked on site and never on Old Town Parkway or Johnson's Ferry Road. Number 13, at the end of the first sentence, which reads demolition permit for the existing building. We're talking about when the old building would be torn down. Have a comma and say completion to be within 90 days of, let me read that again. Applicant agrees to begin demolition of the existing office building within 10 days from the issuance of a demolition permit for the existing building, and completion to be within 90 days of the demolition permit issuance, and then delete the rest of that sentence. It's just not needed. Go to number 17 under landscaping. The entire last sentence of number 17 is to be deleted. And I would add there in its place, landscaping of the site to be completed within 90 days of issuance of a certificate of occupancy. All mature and healthy trees existing on the site that are to be saved must have protective fencing installed at the drip line before any construction commences, and the fencing is to remain in place throughout the construction phase. Okay, item number 23 under general has to do with the right-in, right-out design. At the end of that first sentence, DOT will have final approval of this entry design. That'll occur at plan review, I'm sure. Number 26, I think, is fine. Number 28, the first sentence of number 28 is to be deleted in its entirety. It's really not needed. Under number 28, this has to do with the special stipulations, conditions, minor modifications. Number A should read as follows: reduce the size of an approved buffer adjacent to any property line. and then delete the rest of that sentence. Number B should read, relocate a structure closer to the property line of an adjacent property, and then delete the rest of that sentence. Number C, increase the height of a building above that which was approved, and delete the rest of that sentence. And I believe that will it. So that's leaving it at RM 12, site plan specific. I think that'll do it. Can I get a second to that? Second from Galt. Let's call for the vote. I'm sorry, we can back up.
You mentioned the height, and I don't really, given that, I don't think the 50 feet makes a difference, given the location of it, RM 12. It's not gonna be that visible, and that gives them some flexibility in the design of the building, so
I
the
thought about
height
making
doesn't
it
really
40,
bother me.
frankly. I thought about making it 40.
50 doesn't really, given that you can't really see it except down in the neighborhood, I'm not really sure, because that's gonna be probably the peak of the building, not the livable part of it. So unless,
Thea, Galt, questions, comments on that? Height an issue for you?
It's really not an issue for me.
It became an issue for me when I dealt with this developer on some other
But this-
things, and they went above what they said they were going to do, and I just wanted to send them a message that you really
well,
shouldn't
we
do
were sending
that.
them a message by saying 50 feet, so they can't go any higher.
Okay, I believe the way it's worded, shall be no higher than, and so that, as long as we enforce that, John,
We can take care of it.
we can leave that in. We can, so item number 1 says no higher than 50. I had changed it, so we can leave it at 50. I'll go along with that
Okay.
change.
Well, I'm good
Thought it
with
would
the
be better.
change.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so we have to
Second-
revote.
Second in agreement. Okay, now we can call for the vote, which we just did. Okay, and Skip recused himself, so this is approved 3-1. Ms. Powell voting against. So there we go. Good luck, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Build something pretty. Go sell them. Anybody need a break? Okay, John, let's go to the next one, please.
Yes, sir. Rezoning case Z13, Duncan Land Investments LLC, request rezoning from R20 to RA4 for the purpose of a residential subdivision in land lot 586 of the 16th district. The property is located on the southeast side of Piedmont Road, west of Cajun Drive. The applicant is here. Is there anyone here opposed rezoning case Z13? Let the record show there are 8 people here in opposition. All those wishing to address the board, please come forward to be sworn in.
If you think you want to speak, but you're not sure, come on up, let's get you sworn in. Doesn't mean you have to speak. We'd just like to do this one time. Morning, Mr. Duncan.
Good morning, Planning
Whenever you're
Commission
ready,
and
go right
Chairman.
ahead.
For the record, my name is Richard Duncan, and I am the applicant for Z13, requesting a zoning on approximately 2.87 acres on Piedmont Road for a single-family residential neighborhood consisting of 8 lots. Property right now is currently zoned R20, but I am asking for an RA5 zoning for 8 single-family detached, that's some very important, detached homes. I know currently, right now, the surrounding properties that surround this piece of property to the east, to the north, east, west, and south of it, on all 4, one's across a major highway, which is Piedmont Road, and the other's Cajun, but on all 4, all those sides are R20. I do want to discuss that this piece of property is along Piedmont Road in an area that's been designated in a medium density on the comprehensive land use map as medium density residential neighborhood. I actually also on that, I've looked at all the guidelines under a medium density. It allows up to 2.5 to 5 units per acre. And under my request for what I'm looking for today is 2.8 units per acre. If you look at I'm at the low end of medium density and just a little over the high end of low density. So from my perspective, there's a reason that we require a medium density to allow for a little bit better judgment along these major corridors leading from Piedmont to Sandy Plains to Highway 5 to the actual mall in 575. All up and down from Piedmont to, from Highway 5 to Bells Ferry Road is approximately a little more over a mile, and that whole strip is designated as medium density. I have read the staff's comments and recommendations on this application. They say also that this does meet all the requirements set forth in a medium density, but they did have a proposition based on that it is surrounded by R20 along of this piece of property. But along this piece of property on the R20 is from private individuals that have been there for 40+ something years, and I have spoken to these residents. The two adjoining properties, which is Mr. and Miss Mabry, the Llewellyns, which border the east side of the property. I've discussed it with them. They are fine with what they're fine with what we're doing there. Mr. Strickland, which is across the road, Cajun Road, he's fine with it. The Llewellyns, which are also adjacent to the property, they're fine with what we're doing. There's only one that I haven't been able to talk to, and I think it's the lady to the east of the property. That is a piece of rental property. I've tried to contact her. The phone number that I have for her is not working, so I've not been able to talk. But all the other surrounding neighbors that abut the property are fine what we're doing. On the other side of those properties are R15. And these properties in which I've just mentioned would probably be R15 if they would have sold back 40-something years. They've been like, so these residents have been there for 40+ years. So, but I have discussed that. Also, if you look on the if you put this up for me on the aerial of shows the, I'm sorry, I need this one here. This one here. If you can put that one up for me. Along Piedmont Road, you can see, if you look at line lots 585 and 586, my property is on the 586 side. And if you see all along from Bells Ferry to Highway 5, that is all medium density. Right across the street from my project is Haven Lane. I developed a project over there also. But if you look, there is an RA5 along Piedmont Road right there that goes all the way to, I'm trying to think of the existing road there that goes there. But that's, if you look at all this where's that supposed to be in there? If you look at all this existing, this is all RA4 that goes all the way around Haven, all the way through here. That's RA4 right there, which is less than not even a tenth of a mile from my project. It's right across the street from it. Then if you go down Highway Piedmont Road a little further to the other end, 0.4 of a mile, there's another RA5 zoning classification there also. I know there's some opposition here today, and I have spoke with 2 or 3 of them and their concerns and what some of the things they've asked about. One was they was worried about what was putting in there. You know, anytime you see an RA4, automatically people think multifamily townhomes or something like that. But I told them that no, these are going to be single-family detached residential homes. Lot 1 Homes is going to be the builder there, which is also the one building across the street, and which is a very familiar builder in this area. They will be detached residential homes. Also, after talking with them, you know, I also looked at another design for this piece of property, an R12, and I did do a R12 layout for it, and I can do a R12 layout, but it still has the same number of units, which is 8 units on it. But we've had one lot that was larger, and I was able to shift some things around, which under an R12 makes it, you know, all lots are 12,000 square foot, and it makes them, I think the people maybe feel more comfortable that it wouldn't be townhomes or multifamily. Also, there was another concern about traffic along Cajun Drive. Cajun Drive now has, you know, from Highway 5 to Piedmont, that's a through road through there. Now they've been getting a lot more traffic there since all the traffic is during rush hour. They got these apps, they can find out where they can take a detour and get the easiest access. And so Cajun Road gets a lot more traffic than it did probably 5, 6 years ago because so many more people have access to where to go through. And they were concerned that this was going to create more traffic for them. But I've also, after reviewing the staff's comment, and this is only 8 additional homes, it will not create excessive traffic burden, no more than any other traffic through there. And I explained to them, there's nothing I can do about traffic. We live in East Cobb. I mean, that's just part of where we live. If we lived out in the rural areas, then we wouldn't have as much traffic, but it takes us longer to get to where we're going to. Also, there was another gentleman named Mr. Wheeler with two concerns. One was the houses, and also he had a concern about the entrance of the project coming off onto Cajun Drive. And he said, why don't you have it come off Piedmont? I said, well, the staff in Cobb County and DOT would not want it coming off onto Piedmont Road because it'd be more hazardous than putting it off Cajun Drive. So I explained to him that there was nothing, I told the county's not going to allow me to do that. So, but I know that would be one concern that's brought up today. But also, I was asked about the property on Haven. You know, it's still currently zoned R20, why I did not rezone it. Well, the reason I didn't rezone it, it's got a little bit, it's like a little over 3 acres there also, but there's a creek that runs through it. And the creek has about a half acre on the other side of the creek, and because of your creek buffers and to be in the creeks there too, trying to lay out any other design just didn't feasibly do it. So I was allowed to use, I just made those lots. The actual lots are a little smaller where the actual use be at, but they're flag lots across the creek, which gives me the R20. So I couldn't get a design that would work under an R5, R12, or anything else. So I said, I'll just leave it at that. And, you know, the price point of the property that I was able to get at that worked for me on that one. So it's just because of the creek and the creek buffers, I could not design a design that would work on it. Also, there is another property on Piedmont Road, which is on the other side of between Highway 5 and Sandy Plains that was zoned a few years back. That's also it's an RSL, which it's in a low-density residential area, and it is surrounded by R20 also. So, and it's in a low-density surrounded by R20. So this, in mine, like I said, mine meets the criteria. I'm only asking for 2.8 units per acre, which is, like I said, is on the low side of a medium-density comprehensive land use map, and on just barely over for a low density. Also, my project stays, you know, I've done a lot of projects in East Cobb. I try to look for properties that I can try to stay in the guidelines, not try to exceed anything above and beyond what the land use plans use, what the zoning criteria use. And this property is all one that I've looked at, and when I purchased it, looked at the guidelines, what I was able to do with it. So my projects, I try to stay within all the guidelines. Also, set forth today, I have a stipulation letter dated February the 22nd that spells out all the other different stipulations I'm willing to do. But seeing this application does meet the medium density that it set on the comprehensive land use map, I'm requesting your approval today for Z13.
Thank you, Richard. Let's hear from the opposition now, please. Come on up. Good morning. Give us your name.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Tulin Avard, and I'm the case manager with the Bells Ferry Civic Association. And we are here in opposition of Z13. We believe this proposed development is too intense. Even under an RA4, the maximum number of houses allowed would be 5. This location is not ideal for a higher density development since it is not compatible with adjacent single-family detached dwellings, which are zoned R20 and R15. Furthermore, approval of this request will encourage other zoning requests, which would also not be consistent with existing properties in the area. This area is better suited as low-density residential. Another concern is the existing traffic. Cajun Drive is used as a cut-through to Piedmont Road, and at times throughout the day, traffic becomes backed up trying to make a left-hand turn onto Piedmont from Cajun Drive, and this bottleneck will often block access to the new development. Lastly, we are worried if this property is rezoned RA4, a new site plan could be submitted that may consist of attached residential dwelling units, including the combination of duplexes, triplexes, and quads. On that note, the BFCA respectfully asks that you do not recommend approval of Z13. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name's Shane Peden. I'm a resident on the street. The developer has rightfully highlighted many issues. He's right about all of them, the traffic, the speeding on the road. But also our neighborhood is an older neighborhood. The houses all are built 20, 30, even 40 years ago. And they all access off Cajun Drive. It's a nice, quaint, old neighborhood, and we want to keep it that way. I understand the developer's desire to earn a living and develop the land. It's a nice piece of property, and you just see there's one house on it at the moment, and he wants to put 8 on it. So we organized all the residents along Cajun Drive and the street behind it. We have petitions signed by nearly 50% of the people I've passed petitions to have responded just over the weekend. I intend to collect more by the commissioners' board meeting, and I can leave these with you if you like.
Just give it to the clerk, and we'll make it part of the record.
I received more that are not included there because I'd like to keep an original copy of them, but by the commissioners' meeting, I'll have more. Also, I want to note that at least one, maybe 2 of the residents that was mentioned as the developer having agreement with, I believe I have signed positions in opposition from them. So I'm not sure whose story is right or what the case is there, but we do have a contradiction in terms. But that's all I have to say. Thanks for hearing me.
Is that your original petition? Are you saying you need a?
Those are my copies. I have the originals.
Okay, so we can keep that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Good morning, zoning committee people. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us this morning. I'm one of the residents that's been there for over 40 years.
Give us your name, please.
Joyce Schumacher.
Thank you, Joyce. Go right ahead.
I would like to continue it as an R20. I do not want it increased with 8 houses on that small lot of 3.1 acres. I also do not like the idea of coming off of Cajun Drive to have an entrance and an exit off that area. It would be devastating to we, the residents in that area, coming in and out. From 4 to 6 in the evening, the cars are backed up in front of my house. I would feel sorry for anybody that moved into that new subdivision that was trying to get out during that time, because it would be very difficult. A lot of things. The people have been very happy in that neighborhood. We have a nice, nice neighborhood. It's been kept up very nicely, and we'd like to keep it about the same. We want plenty of space between the houses, maybe 4 houses, 5 houses there, but not 8. We want more space there. And that's my concern as a resident for 40-some years. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Do we have any other speakers? Okay, not seeing any. It's back to this board. Judy, you're just getting the brass ring all up and down here.
I know it, I know it.
Handle this one for us, please.
Thank you. This area is, as most people who travel Piedmont Road know, that they're doing a big project improvement at the intersection of Bells Ferry and Piedmont Road. Barrett Parkway, Barrett Parkway. They're at the school, so there's a big road improvement going on. When you come down Cajun and you go down Piedmont, you come here Cajun, the houses are older, but they're well maintained. They're ranch. They sit on large lots. They sit back off the street. It's an area that I wouldn't mind living in. It's so well kept. But there is a problem of cut through, and that's going to continue probably. Why it was on the land use plan as a medium density, I don't know. I asked staff. It's been that way for many years. But comp plan is only a guideline. We've heard it before today. It's only a guideline, and it's only to be taken into consideration when you look at the surrounding zoning. Surrounding zoning is low density residential, R20. It's been that way. The developer himself proved that you can develop it as R20 by doing the project across the road. He didn't come in for rezoning, so he's doing it there. as it currently is zoned today, he could put 5 houses in there, as long as he met all the requirements of R20. So based on those comments, my recommendation would be for denial.
Okay, for discussion, I assume we have a second from Ms. Powell. You have to have something?
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, we have a
Yeah.
second from Ms. Powell, so
Oh,
go
I'm
ahead with
sorry.
your discussion.
Okay.
Go ahead, Skip.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear her second. No, I support that. I mean, when I drove in there and I looked at this, it's just kind of like, this does not fit. It's not consistent with what is around here. My big question also is, why is that medium density residential in the future land use map along there? I just think maybe the staff, Jason, we ought to, you ought to all review that along that whole section of Piedmont and just ask the question, is that really appropriate for our next time when we look at all that stuff next January? But I would support the motion. I think that it just does not fit. And I recognize that it could be 5 units as zoned. And somebody could put together a plan today that would put 5 units in there as R20. And that even feels like too much, but I understand that's what it could be.
Right. And I was going to do a footnote to long-range planning to look at a comp plan amendment at the end of this year to put it back into the low-density residential.
Okay, any other comments?
I'll just say, I wonder about maybe an R15 for it, which would get them one more lot, and it's consistent with what's around.
I
But-
think because of the problem there with that driveway coming in on Cajun, the traffic that's backing up now, I think I just leave it R20.
Okay, that's good.
So we have a motion, we have a second to deny. Go ahead and register our votes, please. So that is denied. All righty, thank you very much. John, let's see if we can do another one, please.
Rezoning case Z14, EAH Acquisitions LLC, request for zoning from R20 and LRO to RM12 for the purpose of townhomes in land lot A20 of the 17th District. The property is located on the east side of Beach Haven Trail. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed rezoning case Z14? Let the record show there's one person opposed. All those wishing to address the board, please come forward to be sworn in. All thing about it, love.
Do you have opposition to this? One.
Have you ready, Mr. Moore?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commissioners. I'm Kevin Moore, and here representing EAH Acquisition in this application for rezoning. EAH is Edward Andrews Homes. This is their acquisition company and development company in this application for rezoning. This property is 2.41 acres, so almost 2.5 acres, located on Beach Haven Trail, which is just east of really of 285 in this location, and is property that, as you can see on your screen now, is surrounded entirely by RM12 existing multifamily apartment communities, as well as O&I and office buildings. And then you'll see on the right of your screen, this is just to kind of familiarize those who may not be familiar, the R20 areas that are really kind of the outer limits of Vinings. That's a railroad track that's there between the two. So it's a fairly significant barrier between these two land uses as you're going through there, because that is the railroad tracks there as it relates to the R20 on the right-hand side. But you can see on your screen now that this property is on its southern boundary, RM12, western boundary, RM12, and then also surrounded by O&I on its remaining sides. And what we're proposing in this application is somewhat of a unique RM12 application and proposed rezoning. This is seeking RM12 rezoning for the purposes of detached homes. These total a maximum number of 29 homes under the RM12 classification. I'm going to turn to the site plan and kind of go through this, but I think rather than kind of just rolling through it, I do want to address one of the differences with this RM12 application, and that is with this application, we are seeking a detached home. You can build detached homes under RM12. You can also have attached homes under RM12, and you can have multifamily under RM12. In this case, the adjoining RM12 projects are multifamily apartment communities. What we were proposing here and what Edward Andrews Homes looked at originally was an RM12 attached development, which would be townhomes, versus an RM12 detached. And under the RM12 attached arrangement, we would be able to do that, and it would not require variances for that type of design and site plan under the ordinance. However, when you detach homes under RM12, our Cobb County ordinance and zoning ordinance doesn't really fit. For all three, RM8, RM10, and RM12, what I call the RM categories. Detached homes are then kicked into having to meet requirements for RA5, essentially. And we don't have the concept now that we're seeing in the marketplace, not just here, where we're trying to do something like this, but also elsewhere that have been successfully built and developed and sold, is really a concept of detaching townhomes. That is, having detached units and not simply attached townhomes. You would do them all this way, but it is a different way to approach that same level of design, but to do so by detaching them. And what does that do? Well, what we've seen in the marketplace is that the end units in townhome developments obtain a higher premium for a price point. Because why? Those buyers that look at those say, well, I have at least one wall that's not shared. Beyond that, you see a lot of interest and a higher price point premium can be obtained when you have detached units, even though they're close together, they're in a more intense or dense environment, but that's intentional, and that's what is being sought by that particular buyer in that particular market. It's not for everybody, but it is for a good number of people, and that higher price point and premium is obtained because you're not sharing a wall. Yes, it's close, but that's what they're looking for in terms of that market. And unfortunately, our code doesn't provide an exact match from a code standpoint. But what we're doing, and what I hope you'll consider as part of this, is that conceptually, all we've done is detach the townhomes. And I'll show you the elevations for those which we think are outstanding. But conceptually, we've detached the townhome to provide for this type of product, to provide for this type of home. And in doing so, that's the variance requests are directly related to simply detaching. If we attach these, and we did a site plan for that originally to look at, and we attached them and there were no variances, it's just that simple act of detaching, which meets a market, is what is happening here. So let me turn to the site plan. The site plan itself here is Beach Haven Trail. These homes have rear garages, so the driveways are to the rear and alley fed here. These would face out to Beach Haven, and you'll see these are all front-facing homes that will face out to provide for excellent visual aesthetics and curb appeal from the road. And then as you enter the property, there's a central green park area in the middle. And again, these homes then face out to that central green park area. So as you enter, all homes are then have rear-loaded garages, and these are all two-car garages for this particular project. In addition, let me show you, as we move through this, the elevations for these proposed homes. Edward Andrews Homes has developed this as a southern cottage look that they have fallen in love with, and that others have as well. It's been highly successful in other communities. This southern cottage look provides for something just a little bit different. There seems to be some weariness in certain segments of the market and the home buyers that they are seeing to the stone and brick and type of look. And so what they have done is develop specifically these southern style cottages, is what they call them, which are still done to that same high level of quality, but provides a clean look, provides a somewhat different look, and it separates them from a marketplace and from a price points perspective. And speaking of price point perspective, Just for informational purposes, these would be selling in the high 300s into 400 and mid 400s in terms of a price point. We do have a stipulation letter that's dated February 28th, in which we detail out both these elevations as well as some of the standard stipulations and conditions that you would be accustomed to seeing as it relates to homeowners association and so forth within this proposed development. But also, I think it's important to consider in this situation where this property finds itself. It finds itself in a regional activity center. It's actually in Iraq. It's in a regional activity center, and more importantly, it's in a regional activity center with a sub-designation. For those that don't know, our regional activity centers, there's only two, one in this Galleria Cumberland area and one in the town center area. And within each of those regional activity centers, the land use plan, future land use plan, goes further at times to designate subcategories or sub-areas beyond just simply a regional activity center. This property falls in one such subcategory area, and that is it falls within a regional activity center and a subcategory area of high-density residential. So what is recommended for this property is not only an intense high-density residential, meaning up to 12 units per acre. So this same property at 2.4 units, 2.4 acres, we could seek RM12 is certainly in a quote allowable category under the land use plan. It's encouraged, and it would be encouraged to have residential and be encouraged to have multifamily residential. It'd be encouraged to have for sale townhomes, or as we are proposing here, simply for sale detached homes. Again, that's the only change here, and it's just simply a change in looking at it and recognizing some of the differences and nuances in the market. Not everything has to look the same. In this instance, again, our variances are not related to topography. They're related to the fact that we've decided to go for a nuance in the market that we believe can be highly successful, has continued to be highly successful for them in Edward Andrews Homes, and that's directly related to that, and we think it makes for an excellent project. If everything looks the same, then what we lose is the characteristics and character and nuances of the market and of the individual home builders such as Edward Andrews Homes, who can look and can see a project such as this that will have a great success in this location and add overall to the quality of the housing options in this location in Cobb County. With that, I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Principals of Edward Andrews Homes, Mr. Kevin Norton and Mr. Kelly Rhino, are also here and can answer questions as well. With that, we respectfully request your recommendation for approval, subject to our February 28th stipulation letter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Look at that, 30 seconds left. Perfect. Let's hear from the opposition now, please. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Rick Bortle. Thank you for your time. I do have a question, which I know maybe I shouldn't answer. Shouldn't ask this, maybe not. I did see a conflict between the stipulation letter on February 28th and the site plan in regard stipulation number 4 in regard to two-car garages. Stipulation letter said that each unit will have a two-car garage. On the site plan, I believe it, on the notes, it said that 11 would have no garages, and 16 would have garages. So the ones beyond that, that's kind of a minor issue. I do have a question on how sewage is going to be handled in this development. I live on Orchard Valley Drive at the very end, 4334. And two issues may affect me. Where the sewer from this project is going to go, this 29 units is actually more houses than we have on our whole street. We only have 23 units, 23 houses in approximately 14 to 15 acres on our street at this point. So sewage is one issue I want to address. The other issue, it appears that RM12, the setbacks for RM12 are what, 15 to 75 feet in the front, side 35, and the rear 40. What is being proposed is 15-foot setback in the front, 6 foot on the side, and 35 on the rear. Encroaching, the rear decks will be in that area in the rear. Another issue is the impervious surface coverage or area. They're proposing 70%. It's what, 45% for RM12? I have a creek running under the railroad tracks at this point. It has been steadily increasing in volume. I've lived there over 7 years now. At this point, on a hard rain, the brick lining from the CSX going under the CSX tracks are coming off into my property and floating downstream. I'm getting all kinds of stuff. I've complained, and I've been told basically it's my problem. The water on my area is my problem. When they were building on Ivywood a couple years back, building a new unit over there, I was getting, it overflowed a couple times. I have two 48-inch diameter CMPs, corrugated metal pipes, as a culvert. Those completely overflowed when they were building that, and I had dealt with Mr. Bill Higgins before, so I emailed him. He emailed me back in an hour and resolved the problem. I really appreciate that. That's unbelievable cooperation. But that was just some silt fencing and problems they had over there. So that was resolved. But as I say, it's steadily increasing. So I'm really concerned. As a matter of fact, I've driven the area a couple times, drove all through the old church and everything, and looked at where this water flow will go. And it's going to come right down to the creek, which will go across my property as an open storm sewer. Now, I did a quick calculation. Well, basically, let me tell you the addresses this is going to affect. It's going to affect my property, 4332, 4331, 4329, and the new development, 2581 Howell Mill LLC, which is the old Harper property, the 18.7 acres that was just recently sold in December. That creek goes through their property. So the additional flow is going to impact these properties. I did a quick calculation on, say, a two-inch rain, which is a moderate rain, 2 inches per hour. The change of the impervious surface coverage between 70% and 45%, which is the standard for RM12. Per that area, 2.41 acres, would be over 545 gallons a minute of additional water going through my culvert, which is basically the capacity right now. For those of you that don't have an engineering background, a gasoline tanker truck is 11,600 gallons. This 545 gallons a minute plus would fill it up in 21.3 minutes. That's additional water going through my property. And the culvert, which I'm having a little problem with now, is going to redo it, but to completely redo my culvert, it's going to be over $50,000. Tear it out and start over. I have all my utilities going across. So it's not only me, it's these other properties involved. 4332 is beside me, so the water would back up onto them. They have a small child, 2 years old, that has leukemia. He doesn't need to be playing out there in that kind of stuff. The other people also, that would be affected by this. So I have a real concern about the 70% coverage on impervious surfaces. The setbacks, they're not to code, but not much of a problem there. I don't have a problem with that. But I question the sewage also, because if the sewage is going to be going through the sewer line cutting across the front of my property, in 2015, I had Superior Plumbing come out and water jet out some pine tree roots that were in the county lateral. And they ran a camera all the way down then. And at that point, it was about 11 o'clock, midday, early September, when school was in session. That sewer was running 70 to 80% full at that time. So those are my comments. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick, very much. Let's tackle the stormwater issues first. Dave Braden, you want to come up real quick? No.
Yes, sir. Dave Braden with the Stormwater Management Division.
I know you've been out to the site and have taken a look at it. Stormwater detention will be underground, is that correct?
Yes, on this site, I believe that's correct, the way they've got the site plan
Okay,
laid
did you
out.
spot any issues that might be relevant for Mr. Border, Rick that spoke earlier?
Well, the stormwater analysis of the site, the existing site with the church site on it is, I think I did the calculation, it's about 44% existing impervious, where there's no stormwater management on the site now. So almost half the site is 100% runoff from the site. If you looked at the existing zoning, would allow just a little more than that, 46.5%. So from an R12 perspective, which was the zoning criteria they were asking for, it allows 45%, which we would be perfectly happy with that. You're going to have a little bit less impervious, and you're going to have stormwater management provided where it is not even being provided now.
Where does water flow now? During a rain event, does it flow to the street?
No, it actually flows south through the property line into, I believe, is it Ivy?
Ivywood?
Ivywood. And they have an inlet that captures what comes across the property line. It actually goes through their site and through their stormwater management to that creek, which the gentleman mentioned does flow underneath the railroad and then down down to the Chattahoochee from there.
Okay.
But that is a pretty good sized basin. I'd have to check what the overall drainage area, but significantly more than this site. It continues on up past, well past Beach Haven.
So is what they're proposing from a stormwater standpoint, do you think it will improve the flow from this site, control it better, in other words?
Well, I don't necessarily agree that with allowing up to 70% impervious on this site. I was hoping that you're going to be looking at the intensity of this development and reel that back some, but over the current conditions, it's definitely going to be an improvement, yeah.
Okay, so we typically don't allow runoff from a site to be worse than what it is now.
Oh, yeah.
So
Matter of
we're
fact, even, and I will mention that, that's a good point. Even though this site is over 40% impervious now, and there's no stormwater management, their allowable discharge will not be that flow. It will be back to what this wooded site was. So what this site would run off even before the church was built. So that will be their allowable discharge, and their stormwater management will have to do that. So, so it will be a significant improvement over what's coming off the site now. But volume is always a problem. So any additional runoff over what the zoning category, or the proposed zoning category would allow, is going to be additional volume that would have to be handled downstream. But the peak rate will not be any higher than it was before. That's right.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Kevin, you want to come up? And you might need to bring the other Kevin with you. Kevin Norton is, I know he's the engineer with Edward Andrews, and will be real familiar with our stormwater situation. Let's start with that.
Okay.
Runoff that currently leaves the site heading south toward Ivywood, eventually making it to the creek and impacting Rick Border's area.
Correct.
What are we going to do to be sure that we don't cause a problem there?
Sure. Well, number one is, Mr. Braden pointed out, stormwater currently leaving the site is unmanaged stormwater. It does not go through a stormwater management system, doesn't go through a water quality, nor does it go through a detention system. So what that presents from a stormwater management standpoint is the most undesirable circumstances, and that is simply water leaving the site with no management and stormwater management at all. What we're providing here, yes, it's actually right at 67% impervious, but what we are providing is a full stormwater management system that will be underground detention that will require, under those circumstances, we're not looking at what the water is leaving the site today in terms of the hydrology studies and what you're required to do from an engineering standpoint. What you're required to do from an engineering standpoint is take this property as if it was undeveloped, and you have to restrict the stormwater flow leaving your site back to where it's in its undeveloped state. So we're not, the comparison is not to what it is going now. It's even more onerous than that on the developer in terms of the stormwater requirements. With that, this is a small site. It's 2.5 acres, and from that standpoint, yes, are we exceeding the impervious? We are. That's what occurs when you detach homes in this fashion on property like this. That's what happens. We're in a regional activity center, which is the most intense future land use category and reflects the most intense uses that we can have, which is why we think this is an appropriate location for this type of proposal and this type of product, because it is within a regional activity center designated for high density. We could put a single apartment building, and yeah, we could have lower impervious, but you'd have a single building of apartments. I don't think that's what would be desired. I don't think that that would be the best land use and the best product and the best community to build here. So there are trades and balances that come with a proposal such as this, and we think that given, especially Edward Andrews Homes' history, given the care that will be taken to provide for a stormwater management system where there is none now, certainly will compensate for that.
Mr. Norton, you want to weigh in on this? You'd prefer not to, right?
Mr. Moore's handled it very well.
Okay, I know Kevin is the engineer for the site. So bottom line is, we're not going to do anything that will cause an increase in flow. Plus, I would point out too.
It'll actually be a decrease.
Decrease. If you look at Orchard Valley on the right side of your screen there, between this site and Orchard Valley, you do have the Halpern property. You do have
Yes.
a railroad track.
Yes.
And I would contend that most of the homes on Orchard Valley won't be impacted negatively by any stormwater flow. Possibly down near the creek, but if you're telling me we're going to take care of that, then that's the answer.
What you will see, and I'm not an engineer, but I've hung out with enough of them, discussing stormwater.
You play one on TV,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
Exactly. What you will see in this instance will be a situation where the current stormwater volumes and flow that is occurring there, when you have unmanaged, unrestricted water flow from this site, if you take that and compare it to what we will be putting off-site with a stormwater management system, even with the difference or increase in impervious, we'll still have less because it's managed. And what it has to be managed back to is even less than what it is currently. So,
Okay, got you.
Yes.
While we have Mr. Norton here, where will you tie into sewer?
it's in the street, right?
The sewer is tying in Beach Haven Trail. There is a sewer main out in Beach Haven. That is
Okay,
where we intend to tie.
just for the record, give us your name.
Kevin Norton with Edward Andrews Homes.
Okay. So the sewer line runs down Beach Haven, and that's where you intend to tie it. Now, I guess I need to get Tim to come up and tell us capacity-wise that we're not going to overburden that system. Let's just cover it one at a time here and then move on.
Tim Davidson, Cobb County Water System. Actually, that was the first I've heard that there's a capacity concern in that line. It's a little bit surprising to me, but I can certainly look into it. Just based on
You've
looking
had-
at it,
you've
there
had no
shouldn't be a capacity
complaints.
concern.
Yeah.
It may have been a downstream obstruction, but if there is a capacity limitation there, the sewer outfall can be upsized. We do allow for that.
Okay, so that'll all be covered, and I guess at plan review, am I
Plan
right?
review, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
We
Anybody?
can require a sewer flow study, flow meters to determine.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. How many garages we're going to have per unit?
These are two-car garages. I'm not, the The stipulation letter clearly says each home will have a two-car garage. The site plan that was submitted the 1st of January does not have any notation about something less than homes having two-car garages. And so I'm thinking he may have had a much earlier version where something was corrected. But the version that you have, that's part of the stipulation letter of the site plan, which is dated January 5th, which is attached to our letter, which was submitted on January 8th to the Cobb County Zoning Division, doesn't mention garages, and our stipulation letter does.
And driveways length 20 feet, I assume?
They vary, but the minimum driveway length is 18 feet. And that's not for every driveway, but we have worked with your fire marshal's office to overcompensate for that by providing excess parking, as well as worked with the fire marshal's office on our street design and layout to make sure we obtain their satisfaction directly on that issue.
Okay. Any other questions for Kevin? Anybody? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. I agree with Kevin that Cobb County really doesn't have a zoning category that perfectly fits this design, which is detached with minimal distance between. Luckily, this is not like the one in Smyrna, which is literally 30 inches apart, which got a lot of buzz in Smyrna where I live. But this is 6 feet apart. Some of these will even be a little bit more than that. We don't have a category that tackles that. And if this were attached townhomes, there would be 0 variances. But this is a new product. This is a product that, have to admit, the first time I saw this, I was aware this was out there, but I hadn't seen it being done in Cobb. It's maybe the first time it's been done in Cobb, but I know it's being done elsewhere, and I like it a lot. I like the southern cottage look. It's not all brick. It's board and batten, and it's cedar shakes, and it's earth tones, and still you have sizable units, 2,400 square feet, give or take a little. I think these designs are becoming very popular in other parts of the state, and it reminds me sort of Savannah and Charleston and places like that. But we're going to see more of these. I don't think there's any question. And Cobb County zoning is going to need to get with the program and figure out a zoning category that might work for this kind of unit, because I think we'll be seeing more. This design is popular where it is offered among millennials and Generation Xers. I hate to use both those terms, but that's just the fact. People 25 up to maybe 45 years of age that have the money, but they don't want to be in a townhome community that's attached. They want their own unit, not particularly crazy about having a big yard. That's why these are popular. This is quality construction. Edward Andrews has that reputation. It's a unique design, and these are separate, which I like much better than the townhomes. So the concept, I think, is attractive, and hopefully they will sell. 2-car garages, 20-foot driveways on all but just really 3 or 4 of the sites. Great location for this. This type of development, I don't think would work in every location, but this is the perfect location for this type of detached development, and I think it will work. I mean, you're close to I-75, I-285, the shopping and dining, the new dining and shopping in downtown Smyrna, and I think this will work. I don't have too much concern about the variances, because you need to look at the site carefully. You need to look at the zoning site, not the site we have on the screen now, but you have to look at what's around it. Any interior variances are usually minor and are really of no consequence anyway, but the ones around the perimeter, front, rear, and side setbacks are where you have to pay attention. And if you look at the site plan that we have, you can look and see that off to one side, as you're facing this unit, is a road. It's a private drive that goes back to the Halpern building. You can see it there. On the south side of that, you have a large, heavily wooded area. And then on the other side, the north side of that road, you have an 8-foot tall white privacy fence that separates the memory care facility that's been there for many years. So it's very private and separated on that side. Whatever the setbacks wind up being there is really of little consequence. If you look behind, you have the Halpern building, the Halpern Foundation. They also have some office spaces that are for rent there. They're not going anywhere. They have some wooded area off to the side there that backs up to this. And then if you look at the south side, you have Ivywood. That was a development, I believe that was a John Whelan development. Kevin, is that right? I believe in the beginning, a number of years ago, that was a John Whelan development. You have some very high-end townhomes and duplexes in that area, 2 and 3 stories tall, very high-end, have sold for quite a lot of money. But if you look at the site again, there you have a very large wooded area that separates those 3 buildings from the lot line, very heavily wooded. Quite a distance. I don't know what that is there, but it's 50 feet or more. And then you have the setback that they're granting us. The setback on the street was the one that concerned me because that is pretty tight up on Beach Haven. I wish it was back a little farther. I hope we're given some nice landscaping there. That's going to be important from a viewpoint. But when I talk to people that live in the area, especially across the street, which is Winchester Apartments, old apartment complex, been there many years. If you go right up on Beach Haven Trail, just out of view there on the left, there's a brand new Pulte development that sold out before it was even put in. I talked to some folks who live there and they said, if this was in when they bought, they'd buy here. They like the concept that much. So I think that's what we're going to see. And the people in Ivywood say that they love this. They think this is going to be an enhancement to the community, probably will help their property values quite a lot. So other than the setback on the street, I don't have a problem with the density. I love the appearance of this, and I think this will work well in this community. People who said maybe would have a traffic issue because of this, the traffic study that was done says that that is not the case. We have a major intersection to the north of this at the east-west connector. The level of service there won't change because of this. This is not a very heavily traveled, Beach Haven's not a very heavily traveled road, and I don't think adding 29 units to it is going to impact it at all. Staff is fully in favor of this and supports it and recommends approval, and that's going to be my motion. So I'm going to recommend approval of Z14 to the site plan for RM 12 zoning, subject to staff comments and recommendations. Subject to the stip letter submitted by Mr. Moore dated February 28th in the revised site plan, subject to the southern cottage designs that we had submitted to us as well, and subject to a few changes to the stip letter, which will be as follows. Under stipulation number 3, at the end of that sentence, I would add all units must be for sale or shall be for sale only, with a maximum of 10% of the units, that would be about 3, to be rented at any given time. Oversight and enforcement of same would be the responsibility of the HOA. Under number 4, I would add at the end of that has to do with the garages. All garages are to be used for vehicle parking only, and the driveways to be a minimum length of 20 feet. Now, we've had testimony that there may be a few that might not be 20 feet. I hope they'll look at that and try to get them all at 20 feet. If you can't, you can talk to the fire marshal at plan review and hopefully work that out. Go to item number 11. Talks about landscaping along Beach Haven Trail, which I think will be very important. If any of the Edward Andrews homes that I've seen are if you look at those and compare that to what we're going to see here, they do nice landscaping. They do intense landscaping. So I'm not too concerned about that, but I would add at the end of number 11 that all plantings and landscape plans must be pre-approved by the county arborist, just to be sure we have that covered. Under item number 16 of the stip letter, that has to do with the private streets. This typically is in there. I didn't see it, so I would add at the end, and shall otherwise comply fully with Cobb County DOT standards. That's a given, but let's just put that in there. Number 19 has to do with the park area, community park area. I didn't get a lot of information about that community park. I'm glad they have some green space. It's maybe 60 or 70 feet square. It's hard to tell, but that's about right. We need some more detail on that. So I hope, Kelly, you and your guys pull together and come up with a nice landscaping plan for BOC that shows something there. Some sod, a gazebo, a walking trail, some nice shrubbery, something there. I'd like to see that. So under 19, let's add at the end, under the community park, landscape plan for same will include a sodded area, shrubbery, and evergreen trees, and will be approved by the county arborist and the district commissioner. So you're going to need to show the district commissioner what you have in mind for that area. And I know you can do something very nice there. So you talked about detention. I think that pretty much covers it. So that would be my motion. Can we get a second? Second for discussion. Second for discussion from Skip. Okay, Skip, what you got?
Well, I agree that, you know, this seems like it fits in here pretty nicely, and so I'll support the motion, but I do have just a concern, and that concern has to do with the fact that we have so many variances associated with this, which largely is a product of the fact that these units are separated. There's 6 feet in between them with no common wall. So my question is, if we were to do a simple, and I've talked to Kevin Moore about this, if we were to do a simple construction thing of just having a small little fence or something, and I think we talked about it at our work session too, some kind of a wall that connected these, a number of these variances would just simply go away. So that kind of raises in my mind the question, when you do have 6 feet between two units, and half of that's owned by the unit on the left, the other one on the right, what's going to happen in that 6 foot space? What's going to accumulate in there over time? How's that going to work? And so that may want to, it just sort of begs the question, how is that going to be protected from the view of the road from the front in a way that it looks attractive? So I just raised that as a question, and I know Kevin understands that. Otherwise, I think it looks pretty good, and I'm not concerned about the impervious surface issue, simply because it's going to be overkilled, I think, with the underground detention, and the problem is solved from that point of view. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, anyone else?
I'll jump in. A few things. I am concerned about the impervious surface because while they detain it, you're still going to flow more water off the site when you're at, this is a 55% variance on impervious surface. And as Kevin so rightly pointed out, there's a reason why the county has a different standard when you detach units, because you increase impervious surface doing that. And essentially what this proposal is to just gut the code and rewrite it. There's 7 variances, and the smallest one's a 50% variance, all the way up to 100% variance. The lot size variance is a 76% variance, which means a lot's only 24% of the size that the code requires. To me, if this is something Cobb wants to look at, we need to go about it the right way. Go to the commissioners, say, hey, we need a new ordinance that deals with this so everybody can weigh in. You have life safety issues here with buildings being that far. I believe they'll have to firewall the walls in them. Whether there's any other issues, and also to say that this plan, if they were attached, wouldn't require any variances. They may have a whole different plan that we haven't seen, but this plan would still require variances. And significant, and I don't think we should be pushing it all the way up onto Beach Haven. They ought to at least provide that. The variances are really a density grab, in a sense, although they could build a 3-story or 4-story apartment building, an RM12. I get that, but it doesn't push out to the sides. Right now, if you just put the little walls to attach it, a lot of these variances still stay. They don't go away, because it's too close to the side variances, the front. The rear meets it, but then you have a big driveway back there, so it's like, that's not really kind of our normal rear setback. We normally require a buffer back there or something, because normally rear you don't have a road in. So to me, making up a zoning category as we go, which is essentially what this is, because when you're talking about 7 variances and every one of them are more than 50%, those aren't variances. It's just saying, forget the code and do something, we'll just make it up. So I can't support this for that simple reason. I think they could put together a plan where they attach them with walls attaching them and things, and that. Now, to Skip's point, these are going to be condos, which means the people own the interior walls. They wouldn't own that 6 foot. That would be common area owned by the association. So that's my comments.
Go ahead, Thea.
Thank you. Commissioner Porter stole a lot of my comments, but one thing that we hear as a recurring theme with respect to setbacks is that internal setbacks are of no consequence as opposed to external setbacks are. Well, I totally disagree with that, because what is happening, as Commissioner Porter alluded to, when you alter the setbacks, you're increasing the density. And you already have smaller lots here than the 7,000 square feet. And so you're putting a bigger product on a smaller lot, and you create the impervious surface issue. I have a quick question of whoever did the staff comments regarding the 7,000 square feet minimum lot size to go to as low as 1,650. So I guess my question is, the numbers that are on this large site plan are the actual square footage of that lot, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so bear with me. I've done a little calculation here. Of the 29 lots, which the code says should be 7,000 square feet, 1/3 of them are in the low 2,000 square feet. Another third are in the low to mid 1,900 square feet. And the last third are in the high 1,600 square feet. That is a significant variance. And these, we talk about variances. These are gifts that we're giving the developer. And the end product is a burden on the taxpayers' back, because then they have to address these issues.
Okay, Judy, you got anything? No?
It's a burden on infrastructure, so we have to have SPLOST, and, you know, that's how it's a burden. We need more money to correct the issues, the traffic problems, all of that, when it could have been addressed initially in zoning.
I guess I sort of don't disagree, but I don't disagree with what all of y'all said. There is some issues probably. I like the product, but some of the variances are simply because of the location. If you look around it, I'm looking right now, RM12, RM12. I doubt seriously if all these apartment complexes even meet the ordinance today. They've all had variances. There's all, you know, the density probably is a little bit higher on some of the other ones too. So it's a new product. We haven't seen anything like it. We don't know what to do with it, and so we're trying to come up with something to see if it works. This product might not work, but this is an ideal location where you put it to see. It's in a regional activity center to see if something new would happen in this location. And so I know while it doesn't meet the code, I see why they're having to do it, and I would support it, even though I know that the variances, I totally agree with all of you. There's too many variances. But how else do you do this kind of a product?
Yeah, typically you don't.
Because you don't have an ordinance to fit it
Well, you
into.
don't create a new zoning category before you have a product. That's
No, you don't.
You don't
Somebody
do
could
that.
bring this
You don't do
product to
that.
the board and say, create a new zoning category for it, or let's look at
Yeah.
detached RM12s and see. But we haven't really gone through the whole process where everybody's really weighed in and thought about, is this something, are there, you know, when you get down to this small a separation, you have to look at, you know, building codes. You know, how are they going to be constructed? Do you have to firewall both walls going up? where they're only separated by 6 feet? And does it create any special things for the fire department getting access to those buildings? And,
I think you
all of
could,
that we haven't really gone through, that you go through when you're considering ordinances, and when you make it up on the fly, it's a little bit
fire
different.
marshal, can the fire marshal come up here a minute? I have just a quick question.
The fire marshal's representative
Oh.
would be glad
Yeah, I can call
to
you fire
present
marshal.
himself.
Today, you
And
can
I
be
go by
fire
Rock
marshal.
Toller. Yes, ma'am.
These being at 6 foot, is this gonna require the firewalls on
It
each?
will.
On
It's
each
gonna require a
side?
1-hour rating on the exterior wall.
that-
It comes out of the International Residential Code, which we don't enforce. That's the building department. But yes, ma'am, because they're less than 10 feet.
Now, do we require sprinkler system in these?
No.
Okay.
No, they're only 3 stories. I don't know if they're planning to occupy the attic. No occupancy of the attic, and that's actually a term out of the International Residential Code. But 3 stories does not require a sprinkler system.
Okay, so we do the firewall, which would keep, hopefully, the fire from spreading, I think is the intent of it.
That's the intent. You've seen
And
it in
there's
the news in recent history.
Paulding County, I believe,
Yes,
just
ma'am.
had a.
Yes, ma'am.
We can only hope somebody that's getting a divorce don't want to live in here.
That's right. Maybe
Because
you
I
can
believe
make
she
that a
set those
zoning
on fire.
stipulation.
Yeah, that made me, that's a stipulation we have to put in there. So the firewall, but between the buildings, and this is a question that we all have, no matter if it was 10 feet between buildings or 20 feet, you still got the separation of the buildings, and somebody has to take care of that. That's not your question, but my question to you was the firewall and the sprinkler. I know the city of Marietta requires a sprinkler system. If you-
They have an ordinance.
Yeah, that requires it, and we don't. Have we looked at it, or is this product so new that we haven't
We
looked at
have.
sprinkler?
Will you support it?
I would.
Yeah, so, but we don't have they have a 0 square foot ordinance
Mhm.
on sprinkler system, and they
Mhm.
have for a long time.
Yeah, I live in a development that's sprinkled inside of the house, and I'm not attached to anything, but there's a closer built in the city of Marietta, so I wondered if Cobb County had considered that.
Well, there's a fire department right around the corner from this. They can be there in about a minute, so
Thank you.
we're good to go there. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you for
No,
answering my
they're-
question.
It's their second largest one in the
I-
county, so that wouldn't be a problem. As
It's a
far
pro-
as, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's a new product, and sometimes you have to have, Mike, you're always giving a history. I'll give a little bit of a history, not on this piece of property, but when Indian Hills first came in, it didn't meet any code. It met nothing. And you had some RM8 in there, you have some FSTs, you had things that we'd never heard of. So they had to sort of make up a category for it, and it was called a diminutive PUD. If you're in planning, you'll know what that is. It's sort of a combination.
PUD?
No, it's a diminutive PUD. It's called that. And the reason it's called that is because it doesn't mean anything, and you try to find out something new that will work in neighborhoods. And I actually want to give this a chance to see if it works here. So,
Okay, Kelly, you and I'll go and talk to the BOC and see if we can get them to come up with the right code. But I do think that Galt is right. That probably is the way to go, but you got to have the first one. You got to try it, and I think we'll see a lot more of these. As far as the feature of a fence or a wall or something connecting these two, that defeats the purpose of having these as standalone units. I think it would ruin the appearance of them as well. I don't agree with that, and we shouldn't be in the business of designing these anyway. Stormwater runoff, which was mentioned, I'm not sure, maybe it was Skip mentioned that. We heard Dave stand up and say that no more stormwater flowing off this site than would have existed if it was a fully wooded site. That would not be allowed, so that's really not an issue. So I think that's been addressed as well. Anybody else? Okay, we do have a motion, and who was our second, by the way? Okay, Skip was our second, so let's call for the vote. Okay, so this passes 3-2. Guys, build us a pretty product, and then we'll go talk to the BOC about a new zoning category. We are at 11:41. What's our next case? Let's do that one. Let's do it. Let's do it. We'll have our next case then. Oh, shoot. Okay, John, what's next, please?
LUP2, Ricardo and Robin De La Lama request a land use permit for the purpose of allowing more unrelated adults than permitted by the code. And land lot 22 of the 20th District. The property is located on the northwest side of Hickory Grove Court, west of Hickory Grove Trail. Is the applicant present? The director show the applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed to LUP2? Let the record show 3. The record show there's 3 people opposed. All those wishing to address the board, please come forward to be sworn in.
Thank you for your patience. Yeah, give us your name and whenever you're ready.
Christina De La Llama. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and committee. I am here essentially, my father has gone back to school in Colorado, and he goes to school for 1 year, and we don't want to lose our home. So I took over the master bedroom and have rented out 3 of the other bedrooms. And I'd like the temporary land permit to allow me to have roommates that are non-related individuals. Everybody, we have 1 room that's unoccupied. Everybody has their own individual bedroom. 2 guys share 1 bathroom. I have my own bathroom. And 1 gentleman has his own bathroom. There's a total of 4 of us. We use the 2-car garage, and I make the house doesn't have parties, is just I consider it an oasis from the craziness of the real world, because we're all on different sleep schedules. We're very respectful of each other and the neighborhood, and so I'm just looking to allow myself to keep roommates to pay the mortgage until my parents move back to Georgia.
You have lots of other time. Anything else you want us to know?
No, I believe that's it, sir.
Have you discussed this with your neighbors? I assume you've heard from some neighbors? Yes, no?
No, I haven't heard from any of my neighbors, one way or the other. I did have 1 tenant and his girlfriend who caused a lot of drama, and I terminated their lease. So they're no longer in the property.
Okay. And how many are there now?
4 total, including myself.
Okay.
And I'm related to the owners. So there's only 3,
Okay. All right.
non-related.
Okay, we may call you back up. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you.
Anyone here in opposition to LUP 2? Come on up, let's hear from you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Jim Woodruff, and I live in the Hickory Grove subdivision. There are a few problems with this. The subdivision is trying to come back. It was hit hard by the recession. There are a lot of absentee homeowners or house owners that have renters in their houses. Most of them care about their property, and they are even making improvements to their properties. There must have been a problem with this one because the application says that there was a citation, but it doesn't say what the citation was. And we don't live on that cul-de-sac. I'm not sure that anybody in the subdivision got adequate notice about this hearing. And so the people in the immediate vicinity may not have known about it. My wife and I just occasionally drive around the subdivision to see what's new, see who's making improvements. But as you can see from this picture we took of the sign, it was not posted so that it would stay up and be readable. Additionally, on the application for the variance, it says that the application is in response to a citation, and the application says that you're supposed to attach the citation, but there's no citation there, so we couldn't find out what the problem was. But we've had incidences where houses have had multiple families living in them, too many cars parking on the street, people in and out all hours of the night, and as we've seen time and again this morning, precedents hold sway a lot in these decisions. So if we let these absentee homeowners have these variances, pretty soon the subdivision's going to be full of people just, I don't know, drawing rents from multiple tenants and running flop houses, which is something we've already been fighting time and again. So that's my say on it. My wife may have something to add, or there's another resident that may want to speak.
Okay,
Thank you.
come on up. Let's have the next speaker. And give us your name, please.
Good morning. My name is Ronald Woodruff, and that was my husband. And I just have a couple of additional things that I would like to add. The house is a single-family resident home. It's approximately 1,500 square feet. According to Cobb County, it's 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. In addition, the driveway is a single driveway, so parking is an issue because it is very limited. In addition, in the application, it said that the property owner did not live in the residence. As you heard from the petitioner, she indicated that she lived in the residence. So I don't know why the application was inaccurate or incomplete. I would assume when you file an application with this board, you're attesting to the veracity on the application. So I don't know if she lives there or if she doesn't live there. But as you can see from the picture, the zoning notice was all curled in. And it's my understanding, according to Georgia code and according to the zoning application, it has to be open and you have to be able to read it. And the only reason we knew about it is because we were walking around the subdivision and knew of this hearing today and on March 20th. So we would respectfully request that you deny her application for allowing unrelated adults in the home. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, thank you. My name is Tisa Skirman, and I live at 4525 Hickory Grove Court. That is the next door neighbor to the property in question. I would agree that there was not much notice given to neighbors, considering I'm the very next door neighbor and I'm home most of the time. I was only aware when I noticed people stopping to take pictures of the sign, and I thought, hey, I probably ought to go check that out. Uncurled the sign to see what was going on, so I became aware that the meeting was happening about 2 days ago. As far as this supposed great situation here, I would have to disagree as well. There's been a lot of traffic problems. There's not enough driveway to contain the number of cars that have been there. I don't know what the citation was about as well. Go on record, I was not the person to file the complaint. I have no idea what it was about. I am surprised, however, that it's gotten to this point, because yes, there was a talk about renting rooms, which most of us in the neighborhood were pretty laid back. We're like, hey, yeah, you take care, cool, whatever. But the problem is that the number of people is just absolutely, there are too many people. They're coming and going. It's all hours of the night. Middle of last week, there's someone throwing up off the balcony in there, and I can hear it because I live right next door. It's becoming very rapidly a nuisance situation. Trash, it's too much for the trash to handle. It blows off the trash into my yard. I'm picking cigarette butts out of my front yard from people that are smoking in the driveway, presumably because they're not allowed to smoke in the house, and then flicking the butts. And so it's not a good situation. It is a single family home. I have no objection to someone getting renters to help subsidize a temporary situation or even a long-term situation. But the problem is there's a reason that there's a code for the number of people you can have in a house. And it's just too many people that they're trying to rent this out to. And I also agree with one of the other speakers from my neighborhood talking about that it is a transitional neighborhood, We also happen to be one of the families that bought in at the top of the market right before it tanked. So we'd love to see our property values rebound, and this is not going to help that situation at all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. No, not unless she elects to call you back up. So is anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Not seeing and hearing any, it's back to this board. Judy, is this yours as well?
It's mine.
Oh, lucky Judy.
That's
Go
just
for
my
it,
lucky
girl.
day.
You're on a roll.
When I went out to check this site, there was a couple cars in the driveway. The complaint, I believe, was the number of people that they had living in there, and that was the citation that was given. There was also some partying going on, parking in the street. And I think the applicant alluded to it when she was up here about that they no longer live there. This is a single-family development. The daughter lives in the house, and while I can appreciate her parents are not there, I also appreciate that this is single-family, and it's not the duty of this board to try to help you make additional income to make your mortgage payment. Our duty is to sort of to keep it into the single-family. You indicated that you wanted as many as 4, I believe it was, including yourself. But you could have one additional one. The way the ordinance stands now, it could be you and one renter, and that would be within the code. I think in order for this to, and we've been consistent with keeping these areas residential, trying, I believe these are students at Kennesaw, if I'm correct. These are students at Kennesaw. And we've been pretty consistent, the board up here, of not allowing this to occur in neighborhoods because it does tend to run down the neighborhood. You have additional traffic, you have additional parties. So my motion would be to deny this based on that this is a single-family residential area and it needs to remain that way.
Can we get a second?
I'll second that.
Second, Skip. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. So that request is denied. Again, you are allowed to have one tenant beside yourself.
Now,
I'm sorry, one tenant beside yourself there. You can have that. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to take a little break here, maybe 10 minutes, and then we do have to come back and handle a little bit more business, but I think that ends our zoning. We'll be back in 10 minutes after a brief break. Okay, folks, we're back. I think we finished our zoning cases, but we do have a little bit more to handle in the way of a change to the zoning. Thea's mad at me. She just kicked over the trash can. I'm sorry, Thea, I apologize. Okay, John, who's going to present the code amendment? Okay, Mr. Peterson, what do we got in the code amendment arena?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the item we have today is other business, item number 3, which is to consider a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners regarding the 2018 Code Amendment Package, which is Package 2 for Section 134 of the Cobb County Code. And this code section is Code Section 134-198.1, which deals with the Open Space Community District. And there are 2 options for today's item. Option 1, it's got 2 sections. Paragraph A is a correction regarding the density bonus that was taken out last year, so we're striking that from item A. And item B, staff is proposing we delete the part of the code regarding cemetery impervious community area when it comes to figuring net buildable area. For option number 2, we're doing the same thing for paragraph A. We're deleting out a section that should have been deleted last year regarding a density bonus. And the second part of that is in paragraph F4, in which the staff is suggesting that the developer be able to reduce their lot sizes by up to 1,000 square feet per lot in order to create active recreational areas and common areas, which may include a playground or a community center or something else. And that area is not included in the mandated open space. That's a separate area of the lot, Mr. Chairman and Board. There is one person in today's audience who probably wishes to speak on this, Mr. Chairman, so we need to ask the board to open up a public hearing regarding this item.
This is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to address the board on item one, other business 3, which is section 134-198-1 on OSC net buildable area and density bonus, come forward and be heard. You have 3 minutes. Give us your name.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jill Flam, and I will be presenting the East Cobb Civic Association's comments on Package 2 of the revised code amendments. My comments, of course, will be addressing the Open Space Community Code Amendment, and we emailed you some information yesterday. From the information picked up from recent Board of Commissioner work sessions, it appears that the amendment to the Open Space Community Code stemmed from a desire to allow developers to include playgrounds and gazebos in a community's open space, not necessarily allow every type of recreational facility. Right, we feel that the 2 options offered in the current amendment go beyond the original desire by opening the door to increased impervious surface, which the OSC code is meant to mitigate. Right now, the impervious surface for each individual lot in an open space community is calculated based on the minimum lot size of the underlying zoning, not the actual zoning. And this works because there is more than enough open space for the water to flow into pervious area. By adding pool decks, tennis courts, clubhouses, and their associated parking, this all takes away from what was previously pervious surface area. This bonus may also encourage developers to put in amenities that a smaller subdivision may not be able to support through their homeowner dues. And we have seen this again and again in East Cobb. You have a small subdivision, say 55 homes, they can't support a tennis court or a swimming pool. They have to start by opening it up to other neighbors to get the homeowner fees. When that works, sometimes they sell it to another organization who then proceeds to resell the space again for townhomes. And I believe you all heard the case with regard to Chattahoochee Plantation, that this is indeed what has happened. So based on what we believe is the underlying intent of the OSC amendment, we'd like to offer another option by simply adding to the code that is on the books, excluding playgrounds and gazebos to the net buildable net building area definition. You would allow these fairly pervious uses to be included. At any rate, we would hope that change to the code would maintain the basic tenets of an open space community, which is to promote the preservation of green space and to decrease the percentage of impervious surface. We believe our suggested option would do that while also allowing a few amenities that would benefit a small subdivision without overburdening it with high maintenance fees, or the land by further limiting the amount of pervious open space. Thank you very much.
How did you do that? Right down to 1 second. That's pretty darn good. You've been practicing. Anyone else wishing to speak to other business number 3? Okay, not seeing and hearing any. It's back to this board. Comments from the board on this OSC district change.
I'll jump in. You know, other than the ECCA comments here and that, I hadn't heard of the desire just to make it about playgrounds and gazebos. I think it is for the pools and everything else, just to increase the amount of recreational activities that are within a community. That may include things like, soccer fields or baseball fields or basketball courts or whatever. Some of those would be pervious, not. I could see maybe on this adding a 40% impervious limit so that anything that they are putting in recreation matches essentially what the underlying normally is. And that should address the impervious piece of it, because it doesn't change it if you take it out of a lot that can have 40 and put it there. Other than that, I like it. I like deleting these things out because it seems like you're almost penalizing when you're doing the net buildable area for putting in amenities and that, as far as the acreage, because if they're doing a straight R20, they don't have to pull that out of the net buildable area, although it's a little bit different because you have to have the 20,000 square foot lots. But now that we have a minimum lot size, it's still kind of the same to me. So those are my comments on it, because I'm sure other people have comments.
Thank you. This actually follows up on what Commissioner Porter said regarding the minimum lot size. This is my first year anniversary of serving on the Planning Commission, and at that juncture, OSC was not familiar to me, but then staff, helped me with that. And then subsequent to that, we amended it to actually designate minimum lot size. So not even a year later, now we're talking about reducing that lot size. And that's a big issue for me with respect to this code.
Anyone else? Skip?
Yeah, there are two options that are being presented here, and I guess in the first one, it's more of a technicality, but it bothers me a lot because in West Cobb, in District 1, we try very hard to manage down the density of what goes in. We just did Z75 last month, and I'm really excited that we took an R30 parcel and made it R30 OSC with the density and so forth of an R30 OSC rather than the more typical approach of R20. So that's really a positive step in the right direction, and hopefully a standard that will be up there for us to try to match coming into future OSC rezoning applications. The technicality is when you take the net buildable area and you take, at least in West Cobb, and I understand in other parts of the county we don't always put in community facilities, clubhouse and pool and tennis courts and that kind of thing. I suspect because maybe it's a lower price point and the builder is most concerned about price point and the number of lots that they're going to get out of that development. But the problem is that if you take the impervious surface out of the amenity, at least in West Cobb, that's going to be somewhere in the vicinity of, I'm going to say, at least half, 3/4 of an acre to maybe twice that, depending on the development. And if you multiply that by, the 1.1 or the 1.75 multipliers that are in the bulk regulation table for density, that adds another 1 or 2 lots on top of what already is there with that amenity. So it adds to the density. So that's my concern. If you don't touch that definition though, and you move to the option 2, which just simply says reduce the lot size to allow for more amenities that are not part of the open space, they're part of the HOA space though, I don't have anywhere near the same kind of heartburn with that, because the net density of, the total density of the entire parcel is the same, whether this 1,000 square feet comes out of the lots or it's in the lots, the density is still the same, so everybody in the community is going to get the benefit of the open space plus those amenities. So if it were a choice, which I guess is what we're being presented with here, I like option 2 rather than option 1. And that would be the way I would think about it.
Judy?
I think either way you look at it, it benefits the developer more than it benefits us, because you're reducing, the whole purpose of the overlay district was to allow them to have a smaller lot, to give us more open space. And that open space was not to be utilized, it was to be exactly what we said it was, open space. So I'm not sure it even needs to have anything done to either one of them.
Keep in mind, this 1,000 square foot comes out of the
It comes out-
65%, not the 35. You still have to have the 35% open space, so it's not there. And I think if we don't change the definition in the first one, then builders are going to be far less incentivized to put in amenities like a soccer field that takes up a good amount of room. And that, because it's going to reduce the number of houses they can build. Because if you pull out all the amenities out of the net buildable acres, if they pull out 1,000 square feet out of each, then they still have to make the density. So it's going to do that. Maybe we could word it that there should be no density increase due to these things.
The thought that I had was, the density multiplier is 1.1, 1.75, and for R15, I think it's 2.25. Is that right, Phil? Somewhere around there. I haven't ever done an R15. I don't have that in my head.
2.1.
Pardon me?
2.1, I think.
2.1. I know it's over 2. If we kept it, I guess what I'm seeing with option 2, the impervious surface that's embedded in those multiples of 1,000 square feet that are being used, that would come out of the net buildable area and reduce the density, wouldn't it? Yeah, so
it would,
that's not fair. I don't think that's fair. So an alternative is to take those multipliers and reduce them by some 5%, to maybe take 95% of the bulk regulation table numbers instead of 100% like we do right now, and then keep the definition the way it's being proposed in option 1. And do it that way. That might be an alternative too, but now we're re-engineering this.
Or maybe we say the density should be calculated before this is taken out, so that then they can take out the 1,000 square foot and put it in recreation.
That would keep it from being.
That way it wouldn't affect the density at all.
That would make more sense.
And it would keep it from penalizing a builder if they tried to give you amenities, because we'd like to encourage them to put in.
The OSC, let's face it, are going to be seen in 2 districts, probably, your district and your
District 1.
Right.
Yeah, we're not going to see it really in the area I cover, East Cobb. We're not really going to see it in North Cobb either because of the sewer issues.
Right, there's not enough big tracks left to do anything with.
Well, I also think that the problem is that whatever the numbers are, the engineers, the developers go to the engineers and they develop an expectation of what they can get. And, that's not enough on that current zoning, so let's move to the next dense level of zoning and we'll get that number. And so that creates an expectation. going from 1.1 to 1.75 is a big jump. And that really makes the numbers look really nice if you're a developer. So whatever the numbers are creates an expectation. If we allow the numbers, those numbers that define that expectation to increase even a little bit, that complicates our job, which is, at least from where I sit, it's to do everything I can to try to keep the density consistent with what is around it and as low as I can figure out how to make it go.
While
I mean,
protecting
that's-
green
that's-
space and open space.
In exchange for green space and open
Right.
space, that's right, yeah. And I think in our district, I know Bob Weatherford is very excited, and I am too, that, you know, we've got, I don't know how many dozens and dozens of acres are open space now, green space, as a result of the zonings we've done in West Cobb. And we want to continue that trend, but not at the expense of maybe allowing density to sort of creep up with what we've already been, you know, the systems we've been using. So if we have to vote one way or the other, I would vote, I guess a minute ago I said I'd vote for option 2, but I guess I would really like to see option 1 with a 95% number or something like that applied to those bulk regulation table multipliers.
I like option 1, only because what's the purpose of, if we allow them to put the amenities in the open space, you're gonna have the parking, you're gonna have the impervious surface, you're gonna have everything that defeats the purpose of the open space. So.
You're gonna have builders that weren't gonna give you amenities, and they're gonna say, you know what, if I can just put a park here and
Yeah.
they'll
Then
do
that
that,
additional
they'll do
parking's
that
gotta
to
go
get that
down there.
additional.
Except for this additional 1,000 square feet would be optional to the builder, and it would be above and beyond their 35% that they're required to provide.
Why are we considering this?
Yeah, that was my
Well,
question to
That's
John.
John, who asked for this?
There was some comments made by some of the elected officials wanting more flexibility with OSC, so you can have these more active uses within the open space.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And this doesn't really even allow it to be in the open space, it would be additional
No, it's
space.
correct. It's not in the 35% open space. It's a separate recreation area.
Well, last month we had, or whenever it was, we had the alternative proposal, which was to allow this stuff in the open space, and that's gone away, and now we've got this. Yeah.
I would go with option 1 myself, but that's just me.
We keep chipping away at OSC and the original purpose and intent of it. That's what we're doing.
I mean, we could
Either
pass it
one,
on with
either one, whether it's 1 or
denying
2.
both of them.
All you gotta do is read the opening statement. OSC overlay district is established to encourage the preservation of natural resources within a residential development. It's not intended for this overlay district to significantly increase the overall density. Now, I keep coming back to that. I would go with number 1 before I would number 2. I don't like number 2 at all, but I have real reservations about number 1. It just defeats the purpose.
For me, I
Yeah.
could actually go with denying both of them, send
Yeah.
to the board.
I'd go along with that. If you
I mean,
approve
I
either
don't-
one, it would have to be number 1
Well,
for me,
is-
personally.
I don't think number 1 gives additional recreation to the OSC. You know, and if you look at a lot of other places where they have lifestyle, they plan green, but they plan a lot more recreation. One of the things from, I think the very first work session I attended was we were looking at OSC, and there was no recreation whatsoever in it. It was just set aside some land to make the lots smaller. And to me, that doesn't, especially on a larger community, provide any community to it where you have, you know, the amenities, whether it doesn't have to be a pool, but you have, you know, meeting places of some type and walking trails and, you know, soccer's something that I know has come up, people saying, why can't we have some soccer fields in our communities and things like that. So that's what that 1 code we looked at, the recreational overlay, whatever it was called exactly, but that was the intent of that, but it was too much like the OSC, and that probably would have killed the OSCs altogether. So this, I think, this is probably coming as a compromise to that, to, hey, how can we encourage recreation within the communities as well without that? So I could see saying, the density would be based on the larger lot size, calculate the density just like you would have before. Then if they want to take 1,000 square foot out of each lot to put it into recreation, fine, but make it so they aren't getting any extra density doing this in any way. And I'm fearful that the current definition up in option 1 would penalize somebody if they tried to put more in recreation because it pulls it out of the definition.
My thought is that, Thea said it, we just made a change to the OSC overlay.
Why bother?
We've only had one case that I know of, Z75, that's come before us so far since that. I know I have another one next month. But those are the only two that I know of that are in the hopper, that maybe there are others. Let's give, I guess my thought is, let's give the current rewrite a chance. I understand there's an issue that maybe we're trying to solve in part of the county with more recreation space, but trying to force it with a change that maybe ripples in ways we don't want it to elsewhere in the county bothers me. And I
I'm
would
a little
like to think
afraid
about
that
this.
maybe the reason why we're not seeing OSCs is the changes that we made went too far.
Well, that's possible.
And it's choking them down, because now I don't see why a developer would ever bring an R15 OSC, really, because they lose density doing an OSC over a straight R15.
We don't ever see it. That's
Well,
the reason.
we had them before we made this
But
change.
we don't, since the change, we won't see
No,
it.
Yeah, you had
I
one
don't
in
think
District
we'll,
4
we
last
had them
year.
before, we had a number of them, but
see
I don't
many
think we'll see them
R15s
again.
anyway.
I
Well, we
think
did, we had some that year, earlier last year.
I think we
before
could pass
changed
it on, or I personally could pass it on to the board with rejection.
Yeah.
It's
Debbie-
their idea, let them
Right.
Yeah,
do it.
let me ask Debbie, since we have option 1 and 2, do we need to consider each one separately, or how do we do that?
No, I would think you would vote on which option you are going to recommend, because you're only going to recommend one of the two,
Or none.
or none.
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right,
I'll be making-
Are
I'd
we
be-
are we ready for a motion? Galt, we ready for your? Okay.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend denial of both options 1 and 2.
Second.
Okay, let's call for the vote on that and see what happens here. Well, that's where we're going, okay? For the record, I have to state, we have 4 in favor and 1 opposed, being Mr. Porter, okay? Okay, that takes care of that, and we have some minutes to approve from February 14th and February 26th. I need a motion on that. Approve the minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes for the February 14th, 2018 special call meeting.
Okay, second. Second, Judy, call for the vote on that one. And then the other minutes, we have 2 sets of minutes. We didn't get it in the motion. You just did 14th,
Yeah,
February.
I just did, because not everyone was present.
I'll make a motion that we approve the February.
Turn on your mic.
Make a motion that we approve the February 26 minutes as presented.
Second, Judy, call for the vote. Okay, minutes are approved, Madam Clerk. Thank you very much. Okay,
Okay, so those that are not present should be abstaining instead of voting yes, because you didn't know what happened. You weren't present.
what was
Well,
this?
that's an issue for the.
Oh, this
lawyer.
was the minutes approved. Yeah, you're right, you're right.
Well, you can, because you can go back and look at the tape, so you can actually vote on it. Isn't that what you
Well,
guys-
The
I
lawyer
wasn't
is the
there.
lawyer.
You're right, I wasn't there.
I would say only those present should approve the
Should we
minutes.
redo that, or how should we do that? Because I voted, Galt
Let's
voted.
make a substitute motion for whichever
Okay, we need a
meeting.
substitute motion then for the minutes of February the 14th.
Okay, I'll make a substitute motion to approve the February 14th minutes of the special called meeting of the Planning Commission.
And we vote.
And then
It's
the
just
folks
3 of
that
us
were
voting.
there.
And then 3 of you, Galt and I will
Right.
not vote, so 3 of you will call for the vote for those
Somebody else,
3.
yeah, there we go.
So it's approved 3-0 with Galt and Mike not voting because they weren't present.
I'll just say, that's a new legal advice from the attorney's office. We were told
And
before.
if we
you
screwed
can
up,
vote
it's
on 'em.
Debbie's fault.
We've been doing them that way forever.
Which Debbie?
Is the meeting
Yeah,
adjourned?
right.
We
Meeting
adjourned?
meeting is adjourned at 12:30.